For your patience. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're gathered today here to do the best work possible for the town of Fort Myers Beach, to assist the town council and to help our community. May we have the strength and the courage to do everything that's right. Amen. Amen. I just winged these things. That's right. There's Judy Hadia. Oh, it's so nice to see you all here this morning. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of May 9th, 2020.
Seconded.
Okay, a motion by Dawn and seconded by Jane. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, any objection? Motion passes unanimously. Next item is public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment on anything? You're all just here for the view, and that's okay. All right, we'll move on from public comment and go to the public hearings. The first one is 106 Hibiscus Drive. It's a variance from the land... Were you going to say something? Oh, Jason's just coming up. From Land Development Code Section 34638, which has to do with minimum setbacks, corner lot setbacks, and LDC Table 34-3 for front street setbacks and side setbacks. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning. As one piece of housekeeping here, there was an unavoidable problem with the presentation for 106, and they're asking, because of the Zoom, if they can be pushed back to item D, the last reading for this agenda.
Yes, sir. I don't have any objection to that. Does anyone else?
Nope.
Okay. So A goes to D.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
before we start, maybe swear in the witnesses for the quasi-judicial hearings.
All of them at once? Okay.
Might as well.
If anyone is here to give testimony in all of them are quasi-judicial, of any of the cases that are going to be before us today, would you please stand and raise your hand to be sworn in?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
You guys need to
I
stand.
attest.
Witnesses have been sworn.
Wait, he needs to be sworn. Aren't you guys presidents?
Yeah.
Are you all Yes, sir. That's okay.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Okay.
Thank you all. Okay, we'll move on then to B, which is 718 Estero Boulevard. And this is a variance for front street setback and side setback requirements. Jason?
Oh, hold on, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir?
Ex parte communication.
Gosh, you know what? It's been a long week and it's only Monday. I apologize.
It's actually Tuesday.
You see what I'm saying, Scott? That's what I'm saying. Maybe I should just turn this over to you today, Jane.
No.
Okay. It's like I've never done this before. Ex parte communications, Mr. Summit.
No ex parte.
None for me.
Jane?
None for me.
Scott?
None for me.
Jim?
No ex parte communication.
Doug?
No ex parte.
And none for me either. John, anything else I need to do before we go? Just out of curiosity.
We're ready to go forward now.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for keeping me on task. Jason?
I apologize. I'm trying to bring up the correct...
No, listen, you don't need to apologize. I'm already off on the bumbling mode, so you go right ahead.
Here we go.
You can get there.
Okay, I apologize for that. So the first agenda item today will be for 718 Estero Boulevard. This is what staff generally refers to as one of the cottage lots, and this was one of the lots that you had approved a change in the land development code for, hopefully to allow for easier redevelopment. The ask today is regarding requested reductions in the required setbacks for these lots. The ordinance, as it was passed, the cottage lot, allowed for redevelopment and the reduction of the setbacks with the understanding that there would be certain limitations on the design of the home, for instance, keeping the lower portion open, and also keeping the same size as the home as it existed prior. So the request today is necessitated because the ask is for a larger square footage home. And so that's why they've come in requesting the two setback variances. So the variances they would be looking for is a net 6.35 foot reduction to what would be considered the street setback, or the setback line that would be parallel to Estero Boulevard. And then they would be requesting a 2.5 foot east side setback from a neighbor's side setback line as well, so reducing that from 7.5 to 5. The applicant and their architect, I believe, are here and do have a presentation, but I'm open to any questions that the LPA may have on our process or our understandings that we have about this.
Thank you, Jason. Questions from the LPA for Jason? Anyone? Okay. Thank you, Jason. Well, I'm sure we'll have, did we have any emails or anything from neighbors or anything like that on this?
I did not receive any emails for
Okay.
or against.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay, I'd like to make a comment before the applicant presents. So the applicant goes into lot coverage and talks about setbacks from the rear of the property, and they measure it from the coastal construction line. And I realize that staff did not identify as those needing to be variances.
For a rear setback.
So, and the lot coverage.
So, my understanding is, and we had a meeting earlier, earlier this week. It's all running together. He said that he would be able to meet the 40% coverage maximum.
Mhm.
So if that is different or has changed, then we will definitely take that issue under consideration when it comes time for developing the lot. But you are correct, they have not requested a variance to go over the 40% building coverage.
But it's mentioned in their application. And then, and my point is, this application and the last one that we're gonna be hearing, the applicant requests something. And they're requesting something that is not needed just because they haven't interpreted the code right.
Mhm.
And staff, I don't know how it gets so far that we get here to a hearing where they're asking variance where it's not needed.
Okay, and
So in this case, it may not necessarily be a variance that's not needed, but it's, they seem to be basing their rear setback on the coastal construction line when and they identify a lot of 80 feet, when they have a lot of 187 feet.
right,
And they could build all the way up to the CCCL,
that is correct.
but they're leaving space there.
Mhm.
So
Which would eliminate
I'm
the-
wondering if they understood that in the first place, and if there's been discussion with staff and the applicant on those issues.
So the discussion did revolve around them using the front as a deck area as they previously had to again face the Gulf. But you're correct. The drop dead construction line is going to be the CCCL. They've not requested any variances to that. It wasn't presented to us that they would need a variance there. But if they want to take advantage and push right up to the CCCL line when it comes time for development, they could theoretically do that and still request the two variances that they're asking for today.
Okay, and I'll ask them the question if something they understood and was part of it, but just pointing that out because if I'm seeing something where, and I know we're trying to get these to hearing quickly, I get it, but sometimes the applicants and the homeowners, they're not professionals, they're not working with professionals, they're trying to do this themselves, and I think, again, as staff and as a town, we need to try to educate them and help them as best we can. and hopefully give them those options if they don't fully understand them. So just a general comment.
Okay, thank you.
Comment. Very good.
Okay, could we have the applicant do their presentation, please?
Good morning. My name is Robert James Holland Jr. I'm an architect from Central Ohio. I have never been before you, so I think I need to tender myself as an expert witness. I first started construction when I was 14. I was fortunate enough to go to a high school that had a drafting program, and I loved it. I graduated from the Ohio State University undergrad and grad school. I worked for the first architectural firm in 1982. I got my first license in 1991.
Thank you very much.
And I've been practicing ever since. My first big Florida project was the Key West Airport, not the last renovation, the one a long time ago. And I got the opportunity to go to Key West every month for 2 years. It was kind of interesting, and the best part was flying down the coast and flying back because you got to see all of Florida. And
It's a
there's a lot of
beautiful place.
places that when you're looking out the window of an airplane that look like they'd be really fun to explore, and that's kind of why I'm here. My wife and I were traveling up and down the East Coast, checking out different places. And about the time we got to Fort Lauderdale, her best friend was in a horrific accident, and they thought she was dead. She ended up being a quad for a while. Now she's stabilized as a paraplegic. And the reason we're here is because she wanted to come spend her winters in Florida as best she could. Gerard, whoa, that's dangerous. Let's see. Her friend was interested in coming down to Florida for a couple months, and because she knew that I used my notes from the flights and Google Earth to check out where I might want to go, she said, where would you recommend going? Well, a lot of people from our community go to Naples. A lot of people go to Sanibel. And I basically advised her that Fort Myers Beach looks like a nice mix because you got a great beach. You've got, a huge park down at the southern end of the island. Bowditch Park is special. You got a small walkable town, and north of the bridge, it's a different community than it is south of the bridge. And she's been coming down here for 10 years and loved it. How did I get connected with this project and the Zellers? We were walking, my wife and I were walking down their street one day, and I stopped and said to my wife, soak this up, because someday this isn't going to be here. Turns out we were being listened to by a friend of the family whose father actually built one of those cottages. Is it 702? Yeah. Yes. So Jeff Nadeline, his father built 702. The Zeller family is 5 generations are enjoying their cottage, or were. The first generation is gone. The second generation, the dad is down in Costa Rica working on a house. The mom's confined to a wheelchair, and so accessibility is important to us. In front of you is the images. The Zellers got here. His grandfather bought one of the pink shell cottages and moved it to this site in 1960-something. So that cottage was built before there was any basically applicable code for Fort Myers Beach. It was the Lee County Code. And they basically set the house 5 foot from the southern property line, and it was 20-some foot from the rear property line, which could be considered a Estero Boulevard, or could be the front could be the Gulf of Mexico. We'd like to consider the front being the Gulf of Mexico, so we face the Gulf of Mexico. So the images in front of you are basically the cottage before. There was a 10-foot deck, which is permissible on the front, and they got a 6-foot expansion by variance a long time ago. The reason his father came here is he was looking for the best sunset, and he thinks this sunset here on the beach is one of the best in Florida. And I tend to agree with him. Next page. This is a juxtaposition of the previous cottage and our proposed cottage. There's obviously a difference in height, and there's a difference in footprint, as was mentioned earlier, and there's good reason for that. Next page. You hit the slide? There you go. This is our previous floor plan is on the left. It was a 2-bedroom cottage with 2 bathrooms, a modest living room, and a modest kitchen. On the right is our proposed plan. It's basically the same program, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a modest kitchen and a modest living room. The difference here is the bathrooms are on the back as a buffer to the neighbors, and quite frankly, a bathroom in the middle of a building without a window is a closet with a lot of water in it. We're asking for additional footprint for what we think are good reasons. One is the additional height requires a more robust structure. We're actually going to build this thing as a concrete frame after talking to Michael Stewart, who's the engineer for Margaritaville. And some initial conversations with him, I got some basic sizing out of the structure. And we're going to do 8-inch CMU walls with 4-inch metal studs for fishing the drywall or fishing the electric and the plumbing and stuff like that in them. The other part of the additional footprint requested is for the elevator, and then some other things I'll get into later. So it's about accessibility, and it's about a more robust structure that deals with the current code situation. Next page. Next slide. This is our previous site plan. You can see the various dimensions. We prefer to call the rear Estero Boulevard and the front the Gulf of Mexico, which makes sense. On the south side, we've got neighbors that are also part of this community. On the north side, we've got a 7.5-foot easement that allows access through these properties to the beach and allows them to be considered street frontage because it is a platted easement. On the right side, you'll see our proposed footprint. And there's some numbers on there that admittedly are really hard to read. The staff has the presentation. If you guys want to drill down on the details later and look at this, that could be made available. Next page. This is actually the more interesting one, if you can really see it. On the left is the existing cottage, or the former cottage, on the survey, and on the right is our proposed cottage as an overlay. Basically, the back wall's in a little bit different position. The south wall is in the exact same position, and the north wall is right up to the easement. The front wall, which is towards the Gulf of Mexico, is about in the same position as is the deck. Next page. I cannot say enough about how helpful Jason Smalley and Sarah Prost and Jason Green have been helpful in guiding us through this process. I can't say enough positive things about them. When we were initially working on this, I started talking with Jason about here's where our plan is, here's where we're struggling with. He said, well, hold on, first thing you got to do is get an MUD. So with Jason's guidance, we got an MUD, and that means we're allowed to build. The question is, what can we build? As we're waiting for, they also said that, you've got an administrative variance in here. Can you wait a little bit? We have some things in the works that might make it a little bit easier for you in the process because we recognize I call them nice cottage lots. They're called non-conforming lots. Make it a little bit easier. And in one of the hearings, I heard a woman say something about 1921 or 2021. There was a code change that made it a little more difficult for the cottage lots, and that piqued my curiosity. So I found some information on the county's or the city's website about the history of the codes, and then I found Spakowski's website, who basically did the history of it. And I was like, okay, that's kind of a rabbit hole, but I went down that rabbit hole to see what was applicable or what could have been applicable when these cottages were built. One of them is the 5-foot setback. And if you go through Spakowski's website, and these images up on the slide right now are basically excerpts from his website, and it outlines the minimum setback, the front and rear setbacks. The rear was 20 or some percentage of the lot, and the front was, different. And they had a sort of mathematical formula of lesser than and greater than that allowed you to do it. One of the interesting things I discovered in there is at some point in the historical code, there was a section that said non-conforming lots in an RM district should be treated as an RC. Does that mean anything? A little bit. The next interesting thing was that in 2003, there was a section in there for both the RMs and the RC zoning districts that will allow 40% coverage. So there's an inherent conflict in the code when you do the math, and there's no way that staff could ever find this without doing a ridiculously deep dive into what the implications are for a lot. Being an architect, I did that sort of thing. So there's a conflict between, what's allowable by setbacks and what's allowable by percentage, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. Next page, please. So here's your current code. I can't read what's in front of me, and I know you can't read what's in front of you. At 11 by 17, it's barely legible, so I'd encourage you to sort of look at the electronic file here because you can drill down on it and see exactly what I'm talking about. We applaud the recent code changes, and we don't in any way want to diminish the value of those efforts. However, we don't think those changes went far enough because there's no way to foresee what we're presenting without a significant detailed analysis. And admittedly, that level of this level of which is outside of the scope when amending the code in this manner. We believe we have shown that limiting NCL reconstruction to the former footprint is unworkable, and I'll get into that a little more in detail. We're the first to apply under this new code and understand the reticence to grant a variance. However, this inherent contradiction between allowable footprint as established by setbacks still contradicts allowable area by coverage in the applicable tables. We believe we should be allowed to use the post-disaster build-back clauses, which allow for a more resilient and accessible cottage. Here's some math. Next slide, please. Zeller's lot is 4,000 square foot. Coverage was, as I've outlined here, which is 21.23%. With the old setbacks, as if it had been built by the code at the time, we'd have allowed 1312 square foot or 32% coverage. With the new setbacks, ignoring the deck and all that, we get to 30.6%. We're proposing similar setbacks, 18.65 from the front, ignoring the deck, 18.65 from the rear, and 5 foot on the south like it was, and the 7.5 foot north side easement. Coverage in this case would be 1,600 square foot or 40%, which is consistent with the table for the RC districts. Next slide. In the process of listening and trying to figure out how to work with this body, I watched the presentation on the parallelogram proposal on May 15 of May. And I decided to do a deep dive in that and see, well, what was coverage in these proposed red and blue solutions? And if you look at it, I know you can't read it, and neither can I, but the parallelogram lots were in about the 34 to 38% coverage. Each one of the solutions, red and blue, reduced that coverage by trying to increase the coverage for parallelograms by modifying the setbacks. And what we think is that the ideal solution for some of these really small lots is to hold the side setbacks and to allow the front and rear setbacks to vary so that they can approximate, if not get to, the allowable coverage. In the case of the parallelogram solution.
Could I just
Absolutely.
hold the side setbacks, but allow the front and rear setbacks to expand or diminish?
Correct. That means that you can keep
Yeah, I
the
got it.
proper fire separation distance from the adjacent properties either way.
Okay, thank
What
you.
was interesting in this analysis was that in every case, the parallelogram solution went down except one. One actually was higher than the parallelogram. How does that happen? It's about the setbacks. Next slide. This one you can read. On the left is a chart showing the coverage for the neighborhood around 718 Estero.
Excuse me, can I just interrupt you 2 seconds? I just want to make sure we understand what is being requested today, because our staff report does not call for a variance from lot coverage, an FAR. So I'm confused, maybe staff can clarify that. The applicant is giving us a detailed presentation about lot coverage. Our staff report does not say that we have a variance for lot coverage.
We'll
So,
get into that because I'm not sure a variance is required for lot coverage given the post-disaster build-back clauses.
and if staff tells us a variance is not needed, more than happy to make your life a lot easier and say, let's not even deal with this.
I put a lot of work into this.
I
We've
know-
been working on this since October 4th.
I know,
when
but
his
the
dad
best
called me.
presentation when you're coming to a body like this is
Yeah.
not having to present.
Trust me.
And just
I
going to the
believe
motion.
it. And I'm really, really nervous. So if you want a motion to approve.
On your end, I'm just trying to make sure that when there's an application that comes before us, at a minimum, we know what the request is. And that staff work to present us a clear staff report and clear explanation as to what the issues are. And right now, I'm not even sure I fully understand what is needed to make this happen.
Well, let me get through this and we'll wrap that up so that you guys can see your way to seeing looking upon us.
Is Jason here?
He's way in the back.
Yeah, Jason, maybe could you, my thing is, if we don't need to talk about FAR and lot coverage, I'd rather just let's focus on the issues that we need to look at. Yeah.
So again, my discussion with the applicant earlier this week, or last week, excuse me, late last week. The question was asked whether they were planning to go above the 40%, and it was not. I think the analysis here deals with some of the changes in what would have been possible prior to the change in the cottage code. But again, unless I misinterpreted there, and the application doesn't reflect this, they're not requesting to go over the 40% coverage. So we are expecting that any eventual package is going to meet that.
Yeah. So
Hopefully this will make it easier for you guys to look upon us favorably.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason, appreciate that. Once again, he and Sarah and the other Jason have been instrumental in getting us here. And so anyway, on the coverage thing, you can see that in the neighborhood of 718 Estero, there's a wide variance in lot size, and there's a wide variance in the existing square footage that was there. And there's basically a percentage of coverage varies widely from a low of 16.9 to a high of 38.9, all in the same neighborhood. On the right is the analysis of the parallelogram lots, and you can see that the figure number 5, the blue solution actually was above the parallelogram lot. I thought that was a little interesting. So here's some code. Next page. The definition of diminished variance is straight out of your code. And it's basically that it means a variance that differs so little from the adopted regulation that variance effects on public health, safety, and welfare will be inconsequential. That's what we think we have. Underneath that is some more section, is the post-disaster build-back code, where we got to meet all the floodplain regulations. We will. We got to meet all the coastal construction requirements, and I appreciate your comment on the coastal construction line. It is just a couple feet from our front property line. We do, because this was an early platted property, they do own all the way to the water line, so it is 187 feet deep.
Why is it that your exhibits show us an 80 by 50 lot?
Because that's what the survey said. And even though they own it, and I don't fully understand that, to be perfectly honest with you, because my survey shows, the old survey and the new survey shows a 50 by 80 foot lot, but it also indicates the lot length goes all the way to the water line. So basically Zellers have a private beach, and I figured, well, you know, that's a rabbit hole I really don't want to go down. Can we live within? And, you know.
Yeah,
And
you know,
you're
there's
not
a lot
crossing-
of case law, and this could be debated
Yes,
for years,
it
but.
sure could.
But the thing is, and this helps you guys, I don't think there's a need to look at your dimensions and your setbacks from that 80-foot line. I think what controls here is the coastal construction lines and basically your property line.
If
And you
I-
measure setbacks from property lines, and you can't build beyond the coastal construction line. So you actually have wiggle room where you didn't think you had wiggle room.
That would make us a little bit skinnier, and I think people behind us would appreciate that. So we're happy to re-examine our footprint. When I was working on this thing to try to make this work in 849 square foot, I'm counting baseboard. I've never had to do that before.
You're giving one of the most thorough presentations I think we've had in a long time. So I hope the Zellers appreciate your efforts, because it's really, but I think what Patrick's trying to say, I think Patrick's trying to help you along with,
So that would make us, I'd have to do the math in my head, and I really don't want to do that in front of you people because I might mess it up. But I figure that, you know, there's going to be some discussion after today. Hopefully we'll get a variance, and if we need to modify our footprint a little bit or modify our dimensions to get clear up to the CCL, 1978 CCL, we're happy to do that. I just got to make a building that's accessible. I got to, you know, be able to get the elevator in, get the proper clearances around toilet fixtures and kitchen and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so the building must meet the new construction requirements. The building must meet all current life safety codes. The next page, some more code. The interesting thing about your post-disaster build-back is that you basically are allowed to, for the purposes of this subsection, interior square footage excludes hallways, stair towers, elevators, open balconies, under-building parking, similar common or non-air conditioned space. I'm not going to read the rest of it to you because it's kind of boring. Next page. Here's some more math. Zeller's original cottage was, let's call it 849 square foot.
Okay.
Items recognized by the post-disaster build-back section as being allowable additional square footage include an elevator. To get the minimum elevator I found down here from a place in Naples, I believe, was about 5 by 5, which requires a 6'4" by 6'4" shaft. So let's call it 40 square foot. Got a hallway running down the middle of this thing that's about 132 square foot. Admittedly, in the hotel code, bathrooms are allowed to increase by 30 square feet each for clearances. And if you go back and look at our original floor plan, our bathrooms probably fit in about 8 by 8, which is nowhere, you can't make a bathroom work with 88 clearances and that kind of square footage. There's additional 88 clearances. Since the mid-'80s, I've been telling clients that ADA is going to cost you about 15% square footage because of the clearances required around doors if you have a closer and a latch, and the elevators, and a whole bunch of different clearance issues. We have more robust walls. I'm only considering the 8-inch CMU because we had 4-inch stud before. That adds about 108 square foot. The columns cost us 27 square foot of usable space. Additional stairs and a code-required landing, because once you reach a certain number of stairs, you have to have a landing. The landing has to be the full depth of this, full width of the stairs. So that adds 60 square foot. If you look carefully at the plan, on the back of the cottage in the middle, there's a little balcony, an open balcony for air conditioning equipment at about 18 square feet. And then I add a 5% grossing factor to accommodate construction tolerances. It was about 76 square foot. This totals 1,610 square foot when laid upon the existing cottage. We're only asking for 1,600. Next slide, please.
Well, this page throws up some questions for me, but this is very interesting.
That's
So,
fire
Jason,
away.
Jason, can you come back up here? And Don, do you mind sharing your microphone with Jason so he doesn't have to keep just jogging back and forth? So, Jason, my question here then is, instead of him coming in for a variance, couldn't he have used post-disaster build back? I'm asking this theoretically because I'm sure we'll see something else on this issue. Or did he have to come in because the post-disaster doesn't necessarily allow setback changes?
So the post-disaster build-back is also going to be pegged to the square footage that existed before. Anytime somebody is looking to expand from what existed prior to the storm, they wouldn't have been covered by the post-disaster build-back. My understanding here is, Mr. Holland is making a point to say that if he were allowed to use the post-disaster build-back, he would have more wiggle room to not have to count some of these non-livable areas. But because he has to come in for a variance, because he cannot apply
Got
for
it.
post-disaster.
Okay. But it was interesting.
And just to clarify something also, Jason, while you're here, what Anita was bringing up, post-disaster build back, my understanding is it vests your use.
Yeah.
However, when you build back, you have to meet setback requirements and other code requirements, and if you don't, you come in for a variance.
Absolutely.
I didn't remember that
Yeah.
part. That was the glitch.
So
Okay, just stay there,
that's
Jason.
kind of where we're here. There's no causal link between the
got it.
non-conforming lots and the post-disaster build-back. We're there. We might not have to have some of this discussion,
Yeah.
but this is where we are.
Thank you.
That's really all I have. Here's the last slide, please. So
I've got-
we're really here about family and about 5 generations that are using this cottage. I personally have experience with a generational thing. We have a family home in northern Wisconsin where my great-grandfather and a couple other guys starting a hunting fishing club. It evolved into a private family resort with a golf club, central dining room, etc. I am the 4th generation, and the age of my kids, it could be 6 generations that are enjoying that cottage. Similarly with the Zellers. Vince here is the 3rd out of 5 generations. At some point, there'll be another generation using this cottage before
That's the
successful.
fabric of Fort Myers Beach.
Well, and
And
that's
something that we're just praying that we can maintain. So I'm happy that they're here to apply for this.
and that's kind of why I went the extra mile.
Yep.
I've got some questions.
Sure.
If you'd like to walk through some of the site plan.
Pick a slide.
But great job on the cottage. I don't think you guys are asking for anything, which is crazy. you've really limited the square footage. You have every right to ask for more and ask for variance. So the effort that you've made to reduce it, can be applauded, but you can ask for more. And this is why we have
But
these
we
processes.
we
Yeah.
still have to be with 40%.
Yeah,
Okay.
from our coverage.
And,
but, you know.
in deference to the neighbors, that might actually be beneficial to neighbors, because if we were a little skinnier, we would obstruct
Mm-hmm.
less view.
So in our packet, we've got an exhibit that shows, actually, if you want to look at it, I don't know if you've got this where we could pull it up. This exhibit? Okay. Is there a way for you to pull it up? Do you have it in your
need
packet?
to- You need to be at the microphone, though, Mr.
Because
Holland.
I can't
Sorry.
project on there.
That's okay.
Can you go back to the site plan, which was slide number 1?
This is page 75, this is page 75 of 178 in our packet.
Oh, yeah, your packet's huge. I would, so, one of the comments I got was that, Mr. Holland, I have never received this much information on a
When we're looking up at the exhibit, Estero is in that direction.
Yep.
And the way the staff report presents it is, the requirement would be 25 feet, and we're at 18 some, okay?
Correct.
If you look towards the Gulf, and I don't see the coastal construction line on there, but we have it in our packet, okay? At the closest, you've got probably 3.5 feet, but it's angled, and you have up to an extra 10 feet. So you could switch your stairs, put it on that side in the 10 feet, move everything down. You don't need a setback anymore along Estero. You don't need the setback.
Yep.
So you're asking for one variance?
Yep.
The 5 foot.
We actually had that conversation a little bit before we started.
Okay.
I gave up, but I hadn't recognized the CCL line opportunity.
Okay.
But I
So
figured-
does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm trying to, and if
makes
you
a
guys are
great
willing to
deal of
do that, we're dealing with one variance, and we could just have that discussion about that one variance.
That makes it a
Does
lot
that make
easier.
sense to you guys?
We'd be happy to make that.
I don't want to redesign this for you if you're stuck, if you like this design.
I'm an architect.
And you
I've
want to
been
keep that
redesigning
design, I
stuff all
get
the
it.
time.
Okay. But if you're willing to make those slight changes to the deck, are we, staff, are we in agreement that it would mean that they need one variance?
They believe they can hit that 25 foot,
And I'd like to
I agree.
consider
You know-
Estero as the 20-foot as the rear,
As a,
if we may.
Patrick,
yeah.
what might be a better idea, instead of us doing this on the fly here, because you just said if they can, you have the opportunity to amend your presentation between the LPA and the town council.
Perfect.
So you could take these suggestions, we could approve or not approve what you have before us today, and between the time of being here at the LPA and going to the town council, you could modify your presentation and based on what you've heard here at the LPA today.
I think we would be happy to do that. I appreciate your suggestions and your guidance. We will amend it, and it's not a change of the design, it's a refinement of the
Yeah.
design, based on valid
It is a
input.
refinement,
It's a
yes.
refinement of the design.
Yes, yeah.
It makes it better for everybody.
Yeah.
Sure.
And if you say well, when we're talking about front and rear, okay, one is a street setback, okay? And so I don't think you could say we're gonna apply it to the Gulf side. So I think it needs to
agree.
be applied to where
Okay.
staff was indicating.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's you're asking for a variance of approximately 6.25 foot. And again, if you move the building on
Towards
the
the
water
Gulf.
side, towards the Gulf, by 6.5 feet, you got a deck where your deck on the left side on the screen here would be pinched a little bit, but then you could expand it like 10 feet on the other side. So you
I
would
don't
just
think
have.
anybody's gonna have a problem with
Yeah.
that.
So anyways, that's a suggestion I would make. And then we're left with a side setback variance. And at least for me, 5 feet, we've talked about allowing that. We also allow that for administrative variance. So, but for the fact that they're asking for a little more square footage, they could get this approved administratively. I don't have a problem with it.
I have a, can I have a few questions.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of good information there, kind of overwhelmed everybody, but I just wanted to get to the basic issue, which is you'd like to build a 1,600 square foot cottage. It's a nice design. I think it looks great. I think your
Thank you.
construction
Thank you.
methods are very sturdy and the right thing to do on the coast. To do that, you need variances on the setbacks. Basically, that's what you're asking.
Yes, sir.
You need your design requires a 5 foot on the side, and where it is now, appreciate Patrick's comments, but you need a variance on the Estero setback.
Yep.
So 2 comments. One, personally, I would rather see the house closer to the street than the beach. So I'd be tempted to grant the street setback rather than have the house move forward toward the water.
Well,
A.
let's be clear about something. We should only deal with what was in our packet, because redesigning Mr. Holland's project.
Yeah, so I'm saying not
Yeah.
redesign it.
Yeah.
So personally, I think I'm okay with the request for the variance from Estero. Now, the side setback, I thought at our last meeting, fire marshal wanted 13 feet between structures. And if we have 5 and 7.5, that's 12.5 feet. Because remember we agreed to 6.5 feet on the parallelogram lots because of the fire marshals.
If I can speak to that, in the building code, there's a thing called fire separation distance, and it's to deal with buildings on the same lot or buildings on adjacent lots, depending on their size. And there's criteria that you have to have a certain fire rating and a certain percentage of openings from 0 to 5, 5 to 10. Then I think it jumps, and then you go from 0 to 15, and then it goes to 20. So because of our construction type, we basically satisfy the fire separation distance. So a 10-foot separation distance, I'd have to look it up again because I don't walk around with that in my head, but I understand where you're coming from. And I'd be happy to work with whatever criteria you guys want to help apply to us.
I mean, I think I could be okay with this right off the bat if the side setback was changed to 6.5 feet or maybe 6 feet or, something, or 5.5 feet even, so we have 13 feet.
Here's the dilemma, is basically the stick in the mud is the elevator. And beyond that, I've got to deal with clearances to get around beds and to get into bathrooms and stuff like
Correct.
that.
I understand.
And the skinnier I get, the more difficult it is for me to pull this off. So I'd be inclined to sort of say, well, yeah, I can squeeze this thing a little bit to get to the 1,600 square foot by lengthening it, but at some point it becomes a challenge, and I have trouble with accessibility back in the bedrooms and the bathrooms primarily.
Yeah, I totally understand that comment. So my only question is, is the building officials okay with the 5 foot side setback? That's pretty
Question,
tight. 5 foot's pretty tight.
If the applicant with their design meets fire code requirements, Florida Building Code, fire code,
Mm-hmm. And he's already
Would
got
that-
block and
would
concrete.
that suffice your concern in that? I think what the fire marshal was saying is there's fire code and there's ideally what we'd like.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, and we'll give you a chance to address that. But my understanding is again, there's a minimum standard which is set forth by the Florida Building Code and Fire Code, and then municipalities can ask for more, and that's understandable. And in most cases, I think we would strive for new construction if we didn't have non-conforming lots and hardships to meet those, but in this case, we do. At least my understanding, unless it's counter to the fire code, I would be okay with it.
let's say then the 5 foot is acceptable to me, provided we meet all any fire code, which we would have to anyway to get a building permit.
Could make that as
And that the
a condition.
neighbors, your neighbor on that side doesn't have a problem.
Happen to have somebody from the fire district here, so
No.
we'll hear from you in just a minute.
So our construction type, there's five, six, seven, depending on how you want to count it, construction types. There's type 1A, there's type 2. We're basically the most resilient construction type, fire resistant construction type that's out there. We're kind of built more like a hospital or an airport for various reasons, primarily where we sit.
hurricane?
Hurricane, yeah.
Concrete
If you look
frame,
around, the
block
concrete
infill.
stuff lives, the other wood stuff, not so much.
Yeah, it's a good, I mean, your method, the concrete frame and block infill is very sturdy.
When
You know,
I
that's good.
first started talking to his father, I had a couple questions for him, and one of them was, how do you want to build this thing? Do you want to build it out of sticks and take your chances, or do you want to build it to outlast the next, he chose the latter.
So do we have any other questions for Mr. Holland?
Hi, Zachary
Oh, I forgot to
Liebetrue.
introduce my team. This is Zach. He's
Hi,
our
Zach.
counsel. This is Vince. This is Judy, and they're part of our team, so. all yours.
Zachary Liebetrue with Retzel and Andrus on behalf of the applicant. Do we need a motion to recognize Mr. Holland as an expert
No,
witness?
sir.
Okay, great. And then we would like to reserve some time after staff and public comment for rebuttal.
Sure.
All right,
He's
thank
like
you.
my big brother.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, Mr. Holland, we'll take some public comment now, and then we'll come back to you if we need to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, we do have 2 letters in your packet.
We have them.
Okay. And we're working on the others. But we don't have emails for some of the neighbors.
Sure, that's okay. They were all notified. Thank you. So we'll open the public comment for this case. Would you like to come forward?
But,
Are you here to speak as the fire department?
Well, I can speak as the fire official.
As the fire official? So, okay, go
Mhm.
ahead.
So I did not get sworn in, if I need to.
You should be.
You raise your, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And your name is?
Jennifer Campbell, I'm the fire official for the Fort Myers Beach Fire
It's
District.
nice to see you here, Jennifer.
Thank you. So I just happened to show up for the meeting based on our last meeting. I can speak on behalf of the setbacks that we're requiring. The construction type does not negate that. So our setback requirements are taking it to the front of that property, so that if we had to pull an aerial apparatus down that road, we need 19 feet to set that up. That's where the 20-foot requirement comes into play. So our outriggers cannot set up on a ladder truck anything less than 20 foot.
Yeah, but we're talking about 2 different things.
We are.
This one
The
is
setbacks.
from building to building
Oh,
on
Building to
the
building,
east
not front and
side.
back.
And I think you're talking about if we have a drive on the other side and where access is taken.
well, this had to do with, I think the setbacks were trying to be reduced, and they wanted to go down to 5 something, and we said no.
That-
So I believe that was the discussion about the easement on the west
Yeah,
side.
but we just wanted to make sure that the roads were staying the width we needed to a certain point. And
And-
that footprint wasn't encroaching on that roadway.
And they're not asking for any encroachment to that easement on the west side.
No.
Okay,
So-
I just want to make sure.
So,
Yes.
can you opine, and if you don't have the answer, that's fine, to just tell us no. But from the standpoint of Florida Building Code and Fire Code, if they build with the proper methods and the proper requirement, they can have that 5-foot setback?
I cannot speak on behalf
Okay.
of the building code, no.
problem.
Okay.
Okay.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I may, there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of information, and to the applicant's credit, a lot of information and a very nice presentation. But I want to reiterate something that is said by a number of you already. One, that what you have before you is the application, nothing more, nothing less.
That's right.
And there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of information provided about regarding some important related issues, but not necessarily included in the application. Second, with respect to this issue of the setbacks and the clearance of between the buildings for compliance with life safety code and the Florida Building Code. As I've said to you all before, The Florida Building Code is something that's been imposed upon all local governments by the Florida legislature. It's the minimum requirements that all local governments must follow with respect to the construction of anything that requires a building permit. So to the extent that there's a variance request here before you to the setbacks as set forth in your code, from a zoning perspective, whatever approvals you may grant and ultimately the town council may do, can't be at odds ultimately, and it would have to be reconciled with the Florida Building Code because that's state law. We have to follow it. So, that is the job of the building official, that assuming all this gets resolved from a zoning perspective, the variances, whatever they may be, the setbacks, whatever they may be, then the building official, when the plans are actually submitted for formal review and approval, will have to be reconciled. And if there's, by whatever situation, which I don't anticipate, because the zoning staff is very good making sure that what they are recommending and is the as required by the code is the minimum of that needs to be provided in order to be able to build. That we're not going to have an issue there with respect to any potential inconsistencies between the minimum variance granted as recommended by staff and the Florida Building Code.
That's
Does
good.
that make sense?
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Jennifer, you have anything else to
I
add?
don't, I just wanted to
Well,
make sure.
thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, if,
We're still in public comment.
okay.
But thank you, Patrick. Anybody else want to make public comment? Anybody else have anything to say? Thank you very much. We'll close the public comment. Patrick?
I was about to say, Madam Chair, based on the attorney's comments, and the request before us, if you're ready to entertain a motion, I'd be happy to make one.
You can make a motion whenever you
Okay.
like.
So, understanding that we have requests in the staff report for is it 6.5 or 6.25 variance from the street setback?
Yes, sir.
And the setback to the side down to 5 feet. Also, understanding that we've had the discussion with the applicant, that if they so choose, before they get to council, they can make some slight changes and present those changes at that time. But we're here to vote on what is before us. My motion is that we support both variances and send forward a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, would the motion maker and the seconder include in your motion that you find this consistent with the comprehensive plan and it meets the variance criteria?
I do.
I do.
Okay. So is there any discussion on this motion? I'm leaning over to you, Doug, just to see if you have.
The only discussion, like I said, the 5-foot setback on that side is okay with me if it's okay with the building officials.
Excellent. Okay.
And the construction, understand the construction could be made fire resistant, but they may have other concerns like access between structures.
Yes, sir. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Your vote, Patrick?
Aye.
And yours, Don?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
And mine is aye. Your motion passes unanimously, and thank you very much. And Mr. Zeller, we're very glad that your family's going to continue to be here on Fort Myers Beach. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Holland, you don't live here on Fort Myers Beach? Okay, that's because you're a little firecracker. Thank you very much. We appreciated you. All right, next item on the agenda is SEZ 223052, 1249 Estero Boulevard. It's to amend a condition of approval to allow outdoor music.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Fine, and you?
Good, good, good. Thank you. So my understanding of this special exception is the conditions were basically laid out and met to approve a outside new deck.
Could
which,
you give us your name, please?
yes, my name's Greg Von Krumrig. I'm one of the partners of the Whale.
Thank you.
So again, my understanding of this special exception is that it was, all the conditions were met and agreed upon to build a new deck out front. This was on June 3rd of 2013. As I don't have to tell you all, that deck no longer exists. So that is kind of number one there. But we basically just want to follow the normal noise ordinance guidelines from ordinance number 15-01 as far as any music restrictions go, and decibel levels, et cetera, et cetera.
Craig, excuse me.
No problem.
I'm off my game today. Thank you, Scott. Could I have ex parte communication for this case, please, Don?
None.
Patrick?
None related to this request, but meeting with the applicant with regards to the property and future plans.
Okay. Jane?
None.
Scott?
None.
Jim?
None.
Doug?
None.
I have none. That's not true. I spoke to John Richard about this.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, isn't the ex parte more with the?
Ex parte has any communication relative to this case.
Then yes, I did talk to John Richard also.
Okay. Go ahead, Greg. Anything else would you like to say?
Like I said, basically, we just want to adhere to the normal noise ordinance guidelines from 15-01 pertaining to decibel levels in receiving land in accordance to our property.
Thank you, Greg. All right, you could
Perfect.
sit down and we'll, if we've got any other questions for you, we'll have the applicant. Jason? Jason, you know, you could bring your stuff and just stay sitting up here. It would be so much easier. Jacob's getting some other microphones at some point in time, and then we'll just have you up here permanently.
I feel like I'm territorializing the entire table back there. I don't want to have everything, my mess, sort of come over here and take
Whatever
this.
you're most comfortable with.
Thank you, by the way. So just to reiterate where staff's coming from on this staff report, basically what's being asked for is they need to either amend or remove 2 of the 2013 approval conditions. The first one, number 1, is necessary simply because it limits all of the alcohol sales to a building that no longer exists. The Whale is currently working under a temporary use that was approved by town council, and so as many of the restaurants and bars in town are, they no longer have a building. So that's the reason they needed to request, first of all, number 1, to be removed or modified. The other condition of approval specifically was about outdoor music. Again, there's no building to be within, so any live music that is being done on site would contradict that 2013 special approval condition. So again, that's what they're asking for, to continue those uses, alcohol sales on site, and then live music, which they were prohibited from doing by the 2013 ordinance. Otherwise, if there's any questions about the record that we found, I'm open to them.
Question, so they can operate today because of that temporary permission from council?
Correct.
So this allows them to proceed with alcohol sales, live music. Once the temporary use is lifted, the only way they could proceed with any sales or music would be for them to come in with an application for their new building, and at that point, we could impose or not certain conditions on the applicant.
If they choose to rebuild as was before, and I believe that's the intention that I've heard from them, if they do outdoor deck, yes, that is correct. They would need to come in for special exception for that once again.
So this request, technically, we can look at this as being something temporary in nature.
I believe that's a
It'll-
fair assessment.
It eliminates those conditions from the special exception perpetuity, but that special exception no longer applies once we lift this temporary use.
I don't know how legally justifiable that is, but in my opinion, this would allow for them to have music anywhere on site if they rebuilt the building, which they were limited prior to, unless you come up with something that's just temporary in nature or further sort of hem in the approvals. My understanding is if they built that building, they would no longer be under the jurisdiction of that number 1 and that number 3 restriction. So there are some implications even after they build the building,
But
unless.
for them to, so for them to build another building, my understanding is they're gonna need zoning approvals.
They will need zoning approvals. There's a universe where they can come in and develop the site without having to come in and get, for instance, a CPD approval or some other larger site approval or use approval, because it was already a restaurant if they wanted to redevelop that. There is a universe where they don't have to come in for those type of approvals.
But they would still need variances, because even the existing
Correct.
building, the existing footprint was non-conforming. So if they wanted to keep those same setbacks, they would need variances.
That would be true. There's very, very good possibility they may need variances even if they do, for instance, a DO process.
And technically, we cannot impose any conditions with the variance related to these issues, correct?
You can impose reasonable conditions on the granting of a variance, this is a special exception.
No.
No. Oh, yes, it's removing
it is.
special exception.
This one,
Yes.
special
That's correct.
exception.
So you're only dealing with, and you can impose conditions on the granting of the special exception that are designed to mitigate the impacts of the special exception as being amended. Here, it's asking to remove existing conditions in the prior existing special exception that limit the ability of the property and the property owner to have live music. So to the extent that you were to agree to modify the conditions in the existing special exception, they would be directed to mitigating the impacts of that live music on the surrounding area, hours of operation, decibel levels, or baffling, buffering, whatever.
And technically also,
That's it.
consumption on premises would be allowed anywhere on the property at this point. Not limited to,
I certainly would defer to staff and what type of approval the use has from DABT.
and the reasons I'm asking those questions is, personally, from a temporary approval standpoint, don't have a problem with this whatsoever. I've seen what they've done, their operation, want to support that. I have no problem with that. But I don't want to say that we forego the right in the future to want to look at this and discuss it publicly as to where the appropriate consumption on premises should occur, and if in any way we want to limit live music. So, is there a way to
Yes.
condition this upon?
It's my same issue.
Okay.
It's my same issue. I don't want this, it's a temporary situation, and so any approval that's made here today, I would only support it if it ran with the temporary permit for how they're operating right now.
Exactly. Right.
So that would be a condition of approval. Would you agree with that it would be a condition?
I think staff can support that as a condition. So just to reiterate, this would be an approval that is only temporary and would run until the temporary use process is either revoked or they built a new structure to be
In which
within.
case, they
Correct.
have to reapply for this use. They have, so in other words, the approval of this temporary use does not become validated or permanent if they have a building.
I would defer to legal counsel as to how to phrase that to have it run only during the time that they have an active temporary use permit.
Can't
We
you just-
can craft that, and put that condition going forward, to the town council. I understand what you are asking us to do. We will work with staff to include that as a condition, and that the applicant understands that that's the limitation that you all are
Well, and
seeking
we'll work
to
to
impose.
craft that in the motion also.
Correct. So
Okay.
it would be a motion to grant the applicant's request on a temporary basis pending either the expiration of their temporary use approval
Yes.
or construction of a new structure.
No, it's not tied to the new construction at all. It's just.
Just the temporary use?
Just the temporary use.
Okay, then that would be,
Because then
assuming that's the.
New construction, well, I mean,
Okay.
at least for me, that's what it is, so, okay, good. Anything else, Jason, on this one?
Just to make a point, we did receive 3 letters of objection from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Objection?
Yes.
Correct.
It's the amplification. Okay?
That
Any
is
other
all for me.
questions for Jason? All right. Thank you, Jason.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir?
I'd be willing to make a motion.
I've got
Public
public
comment.
comment. I like the fact that you guys are just pushing on the ball here today. Is there any public comment on this? Yes, sir? Yes, sir? You know you get a demerit for your phone ringing. I'm teasing you.
Anita, I love you. I haven't seen you in years, but it's great to see
It's
you.
good to see you too, Bob.
Still remember me at some
Sure,
point.
of course.
And
Yeah.
as old as I've gotten, I can't
Well,
believe
because
it.
I've gotten equally as old.
Yeah.
Anyway, we won't talk about that, but go ahead.
All right. So anyways, my name is Bob Burgess. I lived on the island 35 years, in my house 30 years. I've been through all this over and over again. I have to correct the attorney because you're amending something that was done in 2013. You can't do that. You can't even do it temporary. You need to look into that. The other part is people don't I'm a pro. I've been in this business 45 years. I got 20 years in the media, all right? And I've done every club on the island, all right? I know sound. And basically what it is, when you have salt water, it travels quicker than regular sound. You can look it up, Google it, salt water and sound, salt water and noise. You can Google whatever you would like, but sound travels farther and quicker than regular noise on salt water. And we're surrounded by salt water. Their place is on a canal. It's like there's matter in salt water air. It's like pavement. And it just zips down the canal like you wouldn't believe, 5 times as fast as regular air. This is fact. So when they're playing music, then they're saying, well, decibel level. I'm in the business. I can make the decibel level go 10 times higher, just turn up the bass. And there goes the decibel level, right? I turn down the bass, there goes the decibel level. It doesn't work, all right? You know what works? Common sense. You walk around the property, all right, nobody can, I'm walking down the street, no, music can't be heard. You don't need a decibel level. You need to have human interaction, walk around the property, the neighbors can't hear it, everything's fine. They don't do that. They're out of control now. I don't even live on my property, I'm still rebuilding. But I've had my neighbors complain to me, and people three streets away complaining, sitting on their balcony, and if I mention names, which I'm not, you would know them. So what I'm telling you is these are new people on the island. I've been here, all right? What they want to do is they want to lock in outdoor entertainment. They're greedy. Beach Whale has been under 4 owners. I've been through them all. And basically, those owners knew that they couldn't have outdoor entertainment. That 2013 amendment cannot be, you cannot just bypass that, all right, because there's a legal issue here, and that's not being addressed. So I want to just read one thing, and I'm going to end this. This is very important. Number one, you have the sheriff's department coming out all the time, wasting their time, all right, with outdoor entertainment. If you go back into the 80s, and I was here, there was no entertainment allowed on the Back Bay side at all right? It's just started happening in the 90s. All right, I was here. So what happened between, because there's residential over there, and they didn't want music and noise and everything to bleed into a residential area. Now it's changed. Well, what happened? The island's still the same. I still live here. My neighbor still lives here. He's been here 40 years. So there's just one thing I just want to make, and then I'm going to end this. By law, a property owner is entitled to quiet enjoyment of their property. By law. Also, renters are entitled to quiet enjoyment of the property they rent. This is extremely important to investors who rent property. Renters could refuse to pay and legally pay their bill. The owner could sue the beached whale for loss of revenue. All right, this is real. Okay, you cannot, unless it's in a contract, renting out a property, you have to list, like, well, the beached whale plays music outdoors 7 days a week. You're going to have to put up with it. Do you agree to this? Sure. All right, then there's no legal issue here. But you can't rent a property and have music blasting, and then the renters are not going to come back. The investors are going to lose money. This is not a good thing. All right.
Thank you, Bob.
And they're not in control now. And I love the beached whale. I go there. I eat there. Their food is great. All right. But this is wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. It's nice to see you.
Question for the town
No,
attorney?
because we're in,
Okay.
let me get rid of the rest, not get rid of, but let me hear the rest of the public. It's not what I meant. Yes, sir.
You're betting 1,000.
I know, I told you I'm off my game today, Aaron.
Tell us how you really feel.
Watch your step there.
Oh, yeah, that's a little kerfuffle. Jacob, do you see this? Okay. Got it.
My name is Tom Lump. I live on 145 Palermo Circle.
John, will you pull that microphone down just a little bit too, just to make sure we get your comments? Thank you, go ahead.
Now?
Yes, sir?
145 Palermo Circle. I'm actually a neighbor of Bob, who just spoke there.
Sure.
I'm the neighbor that's been living there for 40 years. Anyway, so I have been through one other public hearing, not the one in 2013, but the one in 1993. 1993 was the public hearing downtown under county ordinance, or under county, and we didn't have city at that point. So anyway, that ruling is why in 2013 that they were not allowed to put music in the outer deck that they built on the lower level. This was, the first meeting was all about the upper level in 1993. I had a presentation on that, but Bob pretty much covered most of that, so I won't get into that. But I will reiterate, there were hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of complaints about music back in 93. So you can almost take this property and divide it prior to 1993 and post-1993. Prior to 1993, it almost drove us all out of our homes. It was just impossible. I personally probably called the sheriff's department over 100 times, easily. Every time the sheriff's department came out to do the decibel meter reading, they were either too late, too early, couldn't get there on time, they didn't want to mess with me, and I hated bothering them for that kind of a situation. I ended up buying a decibel meter, taking my own meter. Anyway, I was told at that time, well, that's not calibrated the way that the sheriff's meter. So you can't win in a situation being an individual listening to music from noon to late at night. I mean, every day. Inside, closed doors, even now. I have hurricane windows in my house. My house was built in 1936. I have hurricane windows in. It's as tight as you can possibly get it. I can still hear the music coming from the outside music now. I'm not even living there now. I'm just working on it, trying to rebuild it. But anyway, so the situation all goes back to the 1993 ruling. And I have a copy of that ruling. If any of you would like to have a copy of that, I can provide you with that. But in that, That's the ruling that has the 7 conditions. And I was under the impression at the time that it was for the property, not for the building. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is for the property. So it's an issue that maybe you should think about before you make a ruling. And that carries on, from the history that I got, it should carry on, no matter what they do, whatever building they build. Should be noise mitigating, should be whatever. But there's 7 conditions, and that whole ruling in '93 was about serving alcohol to outside seating. And these are the conditions that went to serving the alcohol. One of them was, there shall be no entertainment on the deck, none. No live entertainment on the deck. They could play background music, but not live entertainment. So I advise the council, or the LPA, to please read the 1993 version.
If you'd give us a copy of that, we'll give it to Mr. Herod, and
Okay.
and he can give it. Thank you so much.
I'd be happy to give you the copy of that.
It's in your package.
Oh, that's right, it is in
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
packet.
Yeah.
That is in our packet.
Okay, so
Yes.
there's a copy of this, and there's also a copy of the lower one that refers to this.
Yes, sir.
As the, whatever jurisdiction, I guess, on that. So anyway, all I can say is that all of you can go home to your properties. You can sit there and enjoy the evening, the day, whatever, and not have to listen to 24 or 18-hour music from somebody else's establishment. And we all want to go home and enjoy that at our houses, and you too, and I want to continue that. I don't want to get into this fight again. I've been through it once, I don't want to do it again, but here we are.
Okay.
So, anyway, please refer to the 1993 conclusion and go from there.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
comments. Appreciate you being here. Is there anybody else who'd like to make commentary? Yes, sir. Hi.
My name is Mike Miller. I am the owner of the property as well as a partner on the well. And, you know, listening to the testimony, I do appreciate these people coming up. One thing I do want to say is we are not out of control, by no means. I've owned the whale, well, we've owned the whale whopping 3.5 months before the hurricane. We've made extensive repairs, fixing up the place, and we want to make this island great again. But, you know, Ian took the building. You guys will be getting plans here shortly. Probably, we're waiting on comments back. We are going to be doing variances. I'm not sure how many, maybe 2, 3, 4. But we're just want to get an outdoor entertainment for people until we go to rebuild. We've got a tent. I do understand your point of view completely. You know, we want to check decibel levels and do the right thing. But, you know, we just want to make a good experience for people, you know, and where they can walk, have cocktails, have food from the food truck until we get this rebuilt. We're probably we're hoping to break ground in maybe 3 to 4 months. It's going to take 1.5 years. We're going to be completely shut down. No income, no nothing. We're not, if anyone thinks that we're making money now, you guys are sadly mistaken. You know, we're not making money. We lose our, you know what. But, you know, we want to make a great place for someone to come and have a cocktail. There aren't a lot of it out there. So that's why we're doing the outdoor music. I do agree with you. I do think we've had some, we don't go past 10 o'clock, but we do have some bands that have drum sets, and I think it is too loud. We're probably going to be eliminating those. And, you know, we want to have a fun atmosphere, and we welcome everyone to come.
Thank you very much, Greg. Okay, is there any other comment? Yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. Be careful of that little ripple.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Jay Hiley.
Good morning,
My wife,
Jay.
Mary Hiley. Good to see you. Anita.
Nice to see you, too.
We live at, we own 122 and 124 Primo. 124 has been our primary residence now for almost 12 years.
Thanks, Jacob.
And we love the whale. So we always have. We've enjoyed a lot of fun times there and want to continue to do so. However, I appreciate the comments from the previous speaker, because I think if we recognize the situation right now, we're all in the same thing. So the fact that they want to continue to generate some revenue, create an experience for guests on the island, we all benefit from that and we support that. I'd like to see the music toned down in its temporary state, and particularly, and make sure we cut it off at a reasonable hour. We too own rental properties on Primo, and so that will become an issue for us as well. We are deeply concerned about guests that come with children. Kids go to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and music keeps going and going. So, in conclusion, support the Whale, support the rebuild of the Whale, but would like to make sure we keep its temporary state in moderation, and going forward, if there's any music on the property, that it be inside of the property and not outside. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay. Somebody else had their hand up? Good morning.
My name's Karen Slomsky. I actually
Karen,
live
will you pull that, there you go.
Hi. Karen Slomsky. I live between, actually, Bob and Tom, who spoke already. And I agree, if a temporary would be fine, but we are here right now, and the music is very loud. We sit on the back porch, we cannot. The band, yeah, I mean, he said it wasn't out of control, but the band with the drum set was very loud. Worse was the karaoke. It was very bad. Very, very bad. But temporary, I agree. They, I want to see them, I want to see them succeed. I want to do that. But once the building is here, I would love to see them inside. I don't want to sit outside and have to listen to the music. If I don't like the music, I don't want to have to be forced to listen to it. I have grandchildren that come here. I would prefer, like I said. But temporary, I do want them to succeed. So, but not long-term. I don't want to see it.
Thank you so much for your comments. Anyone else care to make comment? Yes, sir. Bob, you set off a chain of events.
Hi, my name's Tim Newman.
Good morning, Tim.
I have two houses on the beach right down from these people here, one a rental and one the one I live in. My house was built in 2018, and I will say I was sitting there, and it's certain bands that cause it. Friday night was the louder band, I think it was. I can't remember. And I was actually in my office in the front of the house, and I'm a woodland home built in 18, so it's all really good. And I thought it was thundering outside. I'll just kind of say that, because it sounded like thunder, and when I looked, it wasn't. And so I walked to my back porch and heard the music. I live further than all these people here. I'm about 300 foot away from you. So, just to let you know, there is that certain drum beat that does it. You've been very respectful. We want you guys there. So I'm all for you, and for the temporary use, we all have problems that we're going through, and so temporary, I think it would be great if we could somehow limit it for the summer, or till when you start to rebuild, because you're going to have to stop then. But I think that was, I think most of us want it to go and give approvals, but do try to figure out certain bans or whatever you can do, so.
Thank you so much, very much
Thank
for your comments. Anybody else? No one? You sure? Okay. Public comment is closed.
He wants to come back.
Yes, Greg, you could come back up.
First of all, I just want to say thank you guys all for your testimonies, and we do hear it more
Greg,
than
would
anything.
you just say, Greg, pardon me, would you just say your name again for the record?
Yeah, Greg Von Krumrig. So we do hear it, and we absolutely want to be good neighbors. I mean that 1,000,000%. Mike and I, we've discussed this in length. And I implore you, if there any time, I've given my business card, I think, to most of you. I think most of you guys have it. Please call me, text me, email, probably not email at night, probably call or text so I actually get it. But please let me know. I will happily do anything I can to make sure you guys are comfortable. It's extremely important to us. And to hopefully relieve you a little bit, our new building proposal, we will have a second floor that's completely enclosed, and we will do our absolute best to soundproof it completely. That's an extremely large emphasis of ours going forward. We've already discussed drum sets. Think it's a bad idea as well. That's something that's it's hard to limit a drum set. It's not exactly something that has a lot of, volume control to it. So we are going to annex anything that has a drum set going forward to hopefully alleviate the sound output for all these guys. But yeah, I mean, that's basically how I feel. But I just implore them to please contact me, come down. Like I said, I've met every single person I've met on Primo and Palermo. I've always given a card to and say, just let me know if this is too much. I think it's worth saying I haven't received any of that yet, so just please let me know. Because we're happy to make optimizations and change whatever we need to change to make sure everyone's comfortable.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any questions or follow-ups for Greg right now?
Yes, I have one. We've heard both from the public and from some of the members here the word temporary. Your application doesn't use that word. I guess I'd like to have you go on the record and tell us that the word temporary is what you're consenting to.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for the future. I mean, obviously, down the road at the new building, I mean, we don't even know exactly what we're able to be built yet. So right now, everything that we're doing is pertaining to our temporary. But I understand completely if this needs to be revisited when we get approval for a new building to say, okay, this is how we can, optimize sound. If we do any type of, like I said, I don't really know what's going to be approved for a new building yet, so it's kind of hard to say. But I know for us, any type of louder, any kind of amplified music, we intend to have on our enclosed second floor. That's going to be completely soundproofed. At least that's the goal. So I can definitely say temporary.
You understand you'd be reapplying then for whatever you want at that point.
Once we understand what type of building that we can build or we're going to be allowed to build, yes, we would revisit this whole thing and then see exactly how that would play out, I think.
Any other questions for Greg? Greg, I have a question. Sure. I can't support amplified music at your location. Under no conditions. I've lived through the hearings that Bob and everybody else referred to, and if this hearing had occurred this time last year, instead of 5 or 6 people speaking, you probably would have had 100 people speaking in opposition to your request. It's just historically been a tremendous issue for those neighborhoods, Palermo and Primo specifically, but the music does carry. Mm-hmm. I mean, the other day when I drove by, and I think it might have been Saturday, I was amazed at the sound generated. And of course now you've just got a tent, so the only way for your sound to go is out. It really concerns me. So the only conversation I'd be interested in having, and I don't know how anybody else has, is if your entertainment was completely non-amplified. So you'd be limited basically to, I guess, guitar players. You wouldn't be able to have karaoke. You wouldn't be able to, and I mean, I'd go specific too with the drums because the drums are an issue with the neighborhood. You have any thoughts on that?
I would just say that there's, several other venues nearby that do a lot of still amplified music,
They're not next or sandwiched between 2 residential neighborhoods. And the other thing too, you have to understand that the temperature of the residents right now, everyone is under incredible stress.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
And
we
you
are
too.
as well. We are as well. We live on the island, of course.
Yeah, so when you have a moment, I mean, for somebody to sit on their back porch and just take a moment and breathe, that's important. And you don't, I mean, if they wanted to come and listen to your music, they would be in your establishment, not, so, anyway, just contemplate that.
Oh, we do.
If amplification is part of the motion, I can't support it at all.
I appreciate that very
Yeah.
much. And again,
I just wanted to tell you.
It sounds to me, after speaking with some of these nice folks, that the canal is actually the worse than anything as far as the sound being able to travel straight back. So that's something we would absolutely have to start
Well, I
taking
was
into
on
account.
Estero Boulevard. And it
Right.
was-
Well,
it
we
was
do
awfully
face
loud.
we face everything forward to try to not push anything back
Yeah.
towards anyone.
I'm afraid that's impossible for you right now.
Right, exactly.
And the other thing that concerns me is the temporary nature of these permits. There's, I don't know what that termination date might be. So we could be saying you could do this for a year and a half. not just the summer, as somebody indicated.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but to my knowledge, I believe the temporary use permits last 6 months, and then we received ours about a month and a half ago.
Okay.
So,
All right, well, that's all. That wasn't really kind of a question, that was just a, here's where I am on
sure.
this, okay?
And like I said, again, I'm happy to make any optimizations we need to make. Like I said, completely removing drum sets, sound meters. I know Bob says they don't work, which I don't.
Oh, no,
I don't,
they work, they're just subjective.
Sure,
You know,
makes sense.
and so I come and do it, this is noise, other than traffic, noise is the #1 complaint on Fort Myers Beach,
I
and it
believe
has
that.
been since before our incorporation. Noise about jet skis, noise about planes, noise about music, noise.
Mhm.
And so I think we have an obligation where we can to minimize that.
I agree, and then like I said, I'll reiterate again. We want to be good neighbors. I want to make sure everyone is happy and comfortable. We have to make some optimizations, obviously, and I hope I'm very clear that please contact me, and I will do everything I possibly can in to make sure that happens.
Well, it's very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet
Any
you.
other questions for Greg? Or okay, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Greg. So how do you all feel about that non-amplified?
I think I can address the comments in my motion, but
Okay.
I'll wait for
Before,
comments.
Madam Chair, before you proceed, there are some comments made during the public participation portion, as well as some of your comments, and I want to make sure that the record is clear as to what the task is before you. Number one, special exceptions can be amended. And, we have had many special exceptions and property owners come before this body, as well as obviously the town council, to amend pre-existing special exceptions, just as this particular property owner and applicant is doing so today. So there is no prohibition on a property owner seeking to amend a special exception, which is what you have before you. With that said, there is very specific criteria that the applicant must demonstrate and persuade you that they've met those conditions to be entitled to the special exception amendment that they're seeking. And they're laid out in page 3 of 4 of the staff report, which is page 99 of 178 of your of your package. There are 9 criteria that the applicant must demonstrate through competent substantial
John, what was
evidence.
that page again?
Page 3 of 4 of the staff report, page 99 of
99.
of the packet. So it is, under the law, it is the obligation of the person seeking the action by this body to demonstrate through competent substantial evidence that they meet all of the criteria. With that said, assuming that they meet all that criteria, the code very specifically does allow this body to make recommendations to the town council, reasonable conditions to mitigate the impacts of the proposed amendment that the applicant is seeking.
Okay, thank you, John.
I guess I have one question before we start the discussion also. So we do have a sound ordinance on Fort Myers Beach, is that correct?
Yes, we do.
And what are the hours? What kind of limitations are associated with those?
Give me a moment.
The nighttime limit is 10 PM. I know that much.
Yeah, and it may vary by an hour on the weekends. I think it's 9 and 10, 9 during the weekdays, maybe 10, and then goes up an hour on the weekends, if I recall correctly. But I certainly can provide that information if you give me a moment.
Okay, and the other question would be, is there a decibel limitation that would be
Yes.
associated with
Yes.
any residents,
We-
with
we-
neighbors and with businesses?
The town of Fort Myers Beach, like many government agencies in Florida, has a hybrid. There is a decibel level standard, but there's also a catch-all provision, which is, the reasonable, what's called the reasonable person standard, that prohibits the noise that causes a disturbance. And there's criteria that the investigating officer applies to determine whether or not there's a violation of that criteria. To the best of my knowledge, As, you know, certainly in light of Hurricane Ian, I do not believe that there is a permanently assigned decibel meter to Fort Myers Beach.
There's not.
That would be a sheriff's function, because we do not have code enforcement in the evenings. And therefore, from an enforcement standpoint, after hours, the town relies heavily, if not exclusively, upon the sheriff's office for enforcement.
Anything else, Patrick? Okay. Doug?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand what we're talking about. So they're requesting an amendment to remove conditions which disallow consumption and live music, but they've been having live music. So is that because of emergency or what?
No, it's just because they've been doing it.
Okay, that's what, yeah, so they've been doing it even though they weren't allowed to. Is that what I'm hearing?
Temporary use.
I'm just trying to understand.
I would defer to staff, but I, you know, absent any information to the contrary, yes, they're not allowed to do it. If they have been doing it, it's a violation of their special exception, a
Which is
violation
why
of the
they're
code.
here now.
And that's why they're here now.
Yeah, okay.
Have anything to add, Jason? No? Okay.
I guess Doug, I'll let you go and then.
So, you know, I could see, you know, when we say unamplified music, usually like a singer or guitarist has some small level of amplification, because otherwise you couldn't hear, you know, but not like a rock band or something.
Hey, Doug, I'm talking zero amplification.
Acoustic
Zero.
guitar.
Okay, I just want to be clear.
Acoustic
Just
music.
purely acoustic music.
Yep.
Okay, bluegrass music.
I know it is.
There
I'm just telling you all how I feel about it.
And there are places that do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
With acoustic,
Yeah.
a voice and a guitar or a voice and a keyboard.
Yeah, voice and keyboards, or a bluegrass band comes to mind, you know, something like that, but just purely acoustic music. I think I could support acoustic music, purely acoustic music, yeah.
Just piggybacking on what Doug was saying with regards to what we're being asked to do. And the staff have an opinion. I'm still concerned about taking a special exception, which has been approved and will continue to be associated with that piece of property into the future.
Yes.
Unless amended, okay? And I don't even know if there's a mechanism where we can amend this temporarily. So is that?
That is the ultimate question right now.
Wouldn't this request be better put forward through a temporary use permit? That could be, just from a legal standpoint, maybe the town attorney can alleviate my concerns, but something about us taking this special exception and changing it on a temporary basis, even there from a legal standpoint. I'm not an attorney. I just feel procedurally something doesn't seem quite right.
Because what Patrick's saying, I mean, the request is to remove that special
Yeah.
exception.
The best way for me to explain this, chicken before the egg.
Yeah.
There is a special exception that exists on this property that binds it. And the absence of the applicant asking that the special exception be released in its entirety, because there's, you know, arguably nothing there, and then they would have to come in if and when they're ready to rebuild and go through that entire process, then, you know, in the absence of amending the existing special exception, there's a prohibition. And that prohibition applies to the property, period. As far as the temporary use permit, you know, having been present during not only this body's discussions about the idea of providing temporary relief and the ability to affected properties and business owners to allow for temporary uses, particularly restaurants and things of that nature. Also being present during the town council discussions regarding those same issues. I don't recall, I cannot remember, and I don't believe that there was any discussion at the council level about, entertainment, for lack of a better description, as an ancillary component to that temporary use permit. My recollection of the conversation was, if you wanted to operate if you were a restaurant and you had lost the use of your restaurant because it had been damaged, we will allow you to do it on a temporary basis by applying for a temporary use permit, and that's what staff has done.
John, if I
to the best
remember,
of my
the
knowledge.
conversation really surrounded food trucks.
Yes, and
I mean,
food
it was
trucks,
about food trucks.
being
Yeah,
a,
and that's my recollection too. And the question is not a blanket temporary use that we've applied to the food truck.
Correct.
I'm just saying that as an applicant, just like if I want to put on an event at the women's club, which is right close to my house, I submit a temporary use permit request for my event. Would that not be the proper mechanism for this, where they ask for X amount of months on certain days with certain limits?
They
A certain-
theoretically could, but you still have a document out there that's
That
made a
prohibits
part
it.
of the public records that runs with the land saying you can't do this
So no matter what, we would have to address that.
at some point. I'm 99.9% sure that these special exceptions get recorded by staff in the public records. And so anyone doing a title search would see this and say, you can't do this. And I know, because staff has approached me, the property owner has approached me and staff on a number of different occasions, talking about what they do, to do some of the things they are trying to accomplish. And one of the, I remember distinctly, one of the things I said to them was, you can request the LPA and the town council to remove the special exception in its entirety. If you want to, wipe the slate clean, so to speak, that that would be a possibility. So,
John, can I cut to the chase here on
Yes, ma'am.
something? Are you basically telling us that we cannot, in a temporary manner, which seems to be the inclination of the board, allow music?
no, I think that you can approve the request to modify the special exception to allow and condition it only temporarily.
Okay.
Okay, if you determine that all 9 of the criteria have been met by the applicant.
That's very convoluted.
So, and again, just before we go into that discussion, if we support it or not. So my understanding from what we've heard is that we could lift the limitations of the special exception on a temporary basis. And that temporary basis could be tied to whatever is sooner, either the town lifts the overall temporary use approvals or them rebuilding. So whatever is sooner, that's where we would end it. And
Or a finite period, right?
Yeah,
I
or
mean, we could say
finite-
90
or a
days.
finite period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Right.
yeah.
And then if we wanted, we could also impose limitations as to what kind of music or what kind of sound we would allow and hours of operation. Is that correct? We've got the ability to do all or some or all of those things.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Don?
No
Oh,
comments.
You said you were ready to make a motion.
I am
so
ready to make a motion.
I'm dying to hear
And
what you say.
I'm going to ask the town attorney to keep me clear here, but so I would move to amend the special exception as requested by the applicant and in consideration of meeting the 9 criteria with the following conditions. That the amendment is temporary for a period of 90 days, that the amendment limits music to acoustic, non-amplified, no drum, bass drum, or drum instrument.
Hours?
And in the hour, thank you, because it's the last thing, in the hour, end at 9 p.m.
Is there a second for that motion? I'll second your motion, Don. Is there discussion?
Yeah, I think you should allow these guys to have amplified music for at least 120 days. I think if they do it well with the collaboration of the neighbors, I think they all said they're okay with it. They just don't want loud banging music. But if you're going to have a guitar player, non-amplified, I don't think that's fair. I think these guys can be good neighbors, and I think we should give them a chance. But just handcuffing them to non-amplified music, it's going to be tough. They're in a tough situation as it is. I don't think anybody walking down the street. I'd rather go to the beach bar and listen to the band over there than listen to somebody strumming a guitar. I just don't think it's fair. I mean, I think the neighbors said that they'd be okay with it on a temporary basis, but I think you're just handcuffing them with non-amplified music.
Any other comments?
I think the time period is too short also.
Yeah, I agree
because,
too.
I know what it's taking me to get my electric done. I'm, going 8
Well,
months
But I
in.
thought
Is your
he's-
purpose to, go ahead, Don.
I thought he said, and maybe I misunderstood, but I thought he said 3 months.
He's hoping.
That they would be ready to start
Yeah.
building, and so that's what I said it at. Is
It could be reviewed.
it could be reviewed in
or
90
extended
days.
after that.
But what would be the cost to him to keep coming back and asking? That's my question. I mean, I think that we could say 6 months would be an easy bet that he's not going to have.
Right. My concern with that and the limiting time period was, and I've lived near rental properties that weren't there when I first moved there, and so I completely sympathize with the folks. And my thought was, in 90 or 120 days, or more than 90, these folks might be living in their places again. And again, I know we're doing non-amplified and that, but I felt like the limitation was at least. I agree with you, Jane. I'm not trying to.
No, I agree.
Impair them with cost or coming back for the request or application, but at the end of the day, I was trying to hear both sides and try to find a happy place for everyone.
Jason, is there a way to, because of the variance or special exception cost for the application, is there a way for us to include in our motion that after 90 days, they could reappear for an extension based on their performance with no additional application?
I don't know the implications of speaking for the head of community development. Generally, his position has been that if it's on the fee schedule, it should be charged. But I don't know if LPA can state that, or if that's going to require town council. I'll defer to legal counsel here on that. They could theoretically wipe the requirement to have them reapply. I would just make one point, and I'm a bit biased here, but I don't think staff wants to keep going through this every couple months, having to basically rehash the same staff report. We would be more than happy to do it, but you're going to get most of the same information over again, other than maybe a notation of any new notice of violations that have come before you, or that have come into the town. But other than that, you're pretty much going to get exactly what you've gotten today if we do it in another 90 or 120 days. So just give that heads up.
Question: for a town attorney, could the LPA, could I amend the motion to say the LPA will review it in 90 days, or is that an option?
Yes, you could. I think that is, that you recommend to the town council that the LPA and the town council review it 90 days, because you're recommending
Their
to the
performance.
town council to, I guess, to the point that you all are discussing to retain, as they say in court parlance or talk, to retain jurisdiction over the matter, so the application basically stays open during that 90-day period, so they don't have to reapply and pay the fee again. Because I think that's what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly.
And again, if that's the condition, we'll work with staff to write that into the staff report and to the ultimately the draft resolution that will be put before the town council.
Do you want to include that?
Yeah, I'll amend my motion to ask for the LPA and town council to review it 90 days.
Okay, I
So,
agree.
so this acoustic music, is it like what is at the Nervous Nellies and, not Snug?
I'd say it's similar to what they had, although some of it was amplified down at the Times Square before, because, you know, you had like 3 different places together, and you didn't really hear the music unless you were right in front of them, and it was pretty much a person and a guitar, or a person and a keyboard.
But
like
those
Megan
were,
Rose.
those were amplified, Don.
Are they? Okay.
They were
Yeah, so I
absolutely
mean,
amplified.
It-
And as somebody who was smashed between those,
Yeah.
believe me, it was,
Yeah.
I mean, we kept our door closed because of the noise.
Right.
I-
It's a small open premise right now.
That's exactly right.
It's, there's a tent there, but it's, you know, to me, I mean, this is me personally, if I were sitting there, I like the music. I'm fine with someone and a guitar, or someone and a voice and a guitar, a voice and an instrument, and still be able to actually talk to the people at the table with me, right? So that was my thought, is it's a small space, and you should be able to hear the music as a, you know, as a background. It's not a concert. I don't think people are going there to attend a concert, per se.
Well, I agree, but I think that the thing is if you know, you're on the beach, you have wind, you have traffic, you should be able to hear the music when you're sitting at the table, too.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if we're limiting it to so low that it will not be like having music there.
Or it might be the best place in town because it's lovely. I don't know.
It's
but
it's also
anyway.
about the neighbors, but yeah, I mean, that was my thought.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other comment?
Well, yeah, I'd like a little more discussion.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Don.
Well, I was going to say, I'm really kind of struggling with this, how I feel about it, but it would have been maybe easier if the request was not simply to eliminate these ordinances or conditions, but to offer, hey, if you rescind these conditions, we will do this, that, and the other thing. That would help my decision. And I've heard, you know, intent and aspirations to be good neighbors, but I haven't seen anything specific.
And I was about to comment about the same thing. So we've got exceptional circumstances after a storm. We want to assist folks in the rebuild. However, the way we're moving about doing things and trying to expedite things, I've had to get pickleball courts approved within gated communities where the gated community people were paying for their own pickleball courts, and we had to do 2 sound studies, okay? And there was mitigation expert testimony, and now we're asked to just approve this blanket with no conditions, and then we are put in a position where we have to establish conditions. And we don't know how the applicant feels about it. We don't know how staff feels about it. And it's partly subjective because we're not experts. And I could tell you that currently I live off island because my house can't be lived in, so I haven't been on the beach a whole lot. I've driven by the Whale, and I know that when I'm here during the week, everything seems to die pretty early. Maybe on the weekend it's a little busier. But again, these are just my personal observation, opinion, with no support from testimony from staff, from the applicant, from any experts. So very similar to what Doug is saying, we're put in a kind of a weird position where it almost feels like this isn't ripe for a decision, but in trying to help you guys, what I would say is, and I'm sure you've put some thought to this, as to what can you live with? What conditions would you be comfortable with? And it might make sense if you guys are willing to tell us that, and maybe we can craft something consistent with what you're willing to do, rather than just have this debate, because really acoustic versus non-acoustic, I also agree that I think a little amplification might make sense, because you can go somewhere where, you know, if you're at the back of the room, or just in this case, back of the lot, you may not even hear the guy singing if there's no amplification. I'd like to have something that's fair, but again, I'm in a position where it's really hard to make the decision.
Could we ask them to come back with the same request, but with, you know, what they're offering in return, so that we have something to make a decision on?
We would shut them down, though, if we did that, just to be clear. I mean,
Oh, because they're doing it, because they're not supposed to do it
They
now.
should be shut down now, today, if it wasn't.
Or
if there's not a-
we could take a recess right now, give them a little time to just
Yeah.
maybe
There-
get together.
Patrick, there is currently a motion and a second on the table. So until either one of us are willing to remove that, the discussion is about the motion and the second.
And then a
Now,
vote.
I get what you're
Withdraw.
saying, but what I don't see here is
Yeah.
any kind of, I mean, I know where Scott is, I kind of know where Jane is. Jim, do you have any comments on this?
I would concur with what the board has been discussing. I think I hear everybody saying they're okay with temporary, so now we're on to the music and the amplification, and, you know, it would be nice to be able to hear that the applicant is willing to live with certain conditions instead of us just applying them.
Would you be willing to withdraw your motion to have the applicant come back up and communicate?
That is so out of order.
It is.
It's
I would call the, I'd
It's
call
really
the
out
vote
of order.
for what
So,
we're here to do. but-
you know what we could do? We can call this question, because I'll tell you, I'm just gonna tell you what my point of view will be. If this isn't the avenue forward, then I'm opposed to anything. Because quite honestly, I think this is a mess. It's a mess. And I'm still unclear, like Doug, about what the ramifications are. I'm really uncomfortable with it. So this is a very conservative motion, and if it isn't if it's not acceptable, the idea of a little bit of amplification, Patrick, I've been involved with the noise ordinance since its inception, and it's a nightmare because the enforcement falls on the neighbors, and that's unfair. It's unfair to say you all have got to patrol them.
Yeah.
Because it is never patrolled, even though we put in a provision that the property has, not the musician, the property manager has to maintain control of the volume. It never happens.
Understood, Anita, but also my neighbor next door has more rights than they do. He can play amplified music anytime he wants.
You could complain
Understood.
with the noise ordinance.
But again, I like to look at property rights and individual rights when I make decisions.
Okay, there's a motion and a second.
Call the question.
Thank you. We'll take a roll call vote. Don?
Aye.
Anita? Yes. Patrick?
Nay.
Jane?
Nay.
Scott?
Nay.
Jim?
No.
Doug?
Nay.
Okay, so the motion fails. We'll take a 10-minute break. Pretty cool. Could everyone please take their seats and we'll re-adjourn the meeting? Folks, if you could please sit down, we're going to restart the meeting. Thank you.
Our design is done, and now we're getting real quotes for stuff.
Folks?
I'm gonna have to phase it.
Thank you.
Because we could have done some other, but that's what we want to do.
Thank you all. It's 11:13, and we will, we're back from our break. Okay. So we had a motion and it failed. Is someone else prepared to make a motion?
Got a question on, can we have a discussion with the applicant, ask him questions before we make a motion?
Procedurally, no. Now, if the rest of you all want to do that, I mean, it's
Yeah.
way out of order. John, you want to apply?
Well, now ultimately, in that type of situation, certainly I think it makes sense, and you would like the buy-in of the property owner in those instances. But at the end of the day, they're your conditions of approval, recommended conditions of approval. And I have seen this board recommend conditions of approval in many instances, not all the time, and at odds with what the applicant has said they find acceptable in the way of those conditions.
Or the town council.
And as well as the town council, that's correct.
And I think I understand everything you're saying. I don't think we necessarily want to make sure they support what our motion might be. And what I would tell anybody who's listening or has any other application, that's why you have to go through the process with staff. You need an application that is ripe, meaning that you've looked at different issues, you're willing to maybe make concessions, put that on paper, because if you come to us with just a straight question with a yay or nay, you might get the nay. But if you take the time to work on conditions, you might get what you'd like. So the idea was to possibly give them the opportunity to tell us what they're willing to do. We would still make form our own opinion and put in our own conditions. But that was the idea, was to have that discussion with them. If we can't do that procedurally, we can go on to another motion, and it's something that they'll have to live with.
I agree with Patrick in the sense that it's kind of unfair to us to make us try to come up with conditions and probably subject matter that none of us are really knowledgeable of. And I prefer, I know I don't hate to shut them down. I really appreciate that they're trying to keep things going on the beach and want to support that. But I think they're going to have to come back to us with the same request, but with their proposal.
With all due respect to the comments, I mean, they did speak to us twice, and they did mention the drums, and they did mention, trying to fit within what the neighborhood and the town was looking for, which was where my motion was definitely crafted.
Well, my thing is I'd like to see something like what Mantanzas has, what Snug Harbor has, what Nervous Nellies has. They're all on water. They have music you can talk over. And I think that this temporary permit would be a way for the owners to show the neighbors what they're willing to do and can do. So, I mean, I think the fact that he's saying we're going to eliminate the bands with the drums and the, really loud things, that will help immensely. So, I don't know,
You know what? The bottom line is, there's nothing that the applicant could get up and I hate to be sounding, so adversarial, because I'm not, but there's nothing that the applicant could get up here and say right this second that you all couldn't craft as a motion. You've heard from the applicant, you've heard from the neighbors. And whether, if they don't accept it, they have the option to speak before the town council and say, the LPA said A, B, C, we can live with A and B, we cannot live with C. And then we get off go, because we are not the ultimate decision makers.
And I'm okay with following procedure. We'll just know next time that if we have a case like that, before we close public comment, we have that discussion.
Yeah.
Understood.
And something else, I would also, Jason, I think the world of you, but I would like to see a stronger staff report giving us the yes or no instead of just here are the facts of the case. Because we can read the facts of the case for ourselves, but we need to have a decisive staff report of here's why we believe it meets or doesn't meet the criteria. It would be very helpful to us. So, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, well, would somebody like to make another motion?
Before we make a motion, just a comment to what Jane was saying. Jane, I think I'm in line with what you're saying. I'm not exactly sure what conditions are applied at Snug Harbor and those other places. Again, I would like to give them an opportunity to, maybe we limit the time and it could be revisited at that point. An opportunity to work with their neighbors and do what they said they would do. I'm perfectly good with putting a condition in there of no drums. I would like to allow some amplified music, maybe with some hours, some limitations when it comes to the hours. So I would entertain a motion that with some limitations, but also giving them an opportunity to do what they.
You ready to make that motion?
No, I'm not exactly sure how to make that motion, so if anybody's got any thoughts, that'd be great.
I don't understand what some amplification is.
Well, maybe some amplification during the day.
Could we say,
Okay.
could we say, we could make a motion to approve their request on a temporary basis, on the condition that they do their best reasonable efforts to accommodate the neighbors' concerns that we heard, and leave it up to them to come up with the best reasonable efforts to mitigate the noise issue.
I'm just sitting here and telling you as the town attorney, that's going to be nothing more than words on a piece of paper, because there's no way to enforce it from a practical standpoint. With all due respect, I understand the desire and what you are trying to accomplish, but putting in language, you'll use your best efforts to work with the neighbors is, what's the threshold for enforcement?
So what we need is some specific commitments.
What would you guys think? I'll just throw a few things out there and you tell me before I make a motion. How about we say, allow amplified sound till 6:30 weekdays, on the weekend till 9 or 10, whatever the noise ordinance is. I don't know what it is, but consistent on the weekend. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
You've got the 4th of July on Tuesday, so I think you should make the holidays too.
4th of July, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, into the evening. And then we don't ask them to reapply. We just say that within a month or two, whatever we have our meeting, we reevaluate that. And if they are not being good neighbors and they're not true to what they said they would do, then we can make it more stringent.
But we don't have the authority. We don't have the authority to do that. We have the authority to approve or deny the request with or without conditions.
Well, we can add those as conditions.
Yeah.
So we could, so my thing would be, 6:30, I think is, I would include more of the dinner hour, maybe,
Okay.
to allow music through dinner, but I think that we could put in conditions as no drums, that.
What about karaoke?
No
Well,
karaoke.
karaoke is.
That was a complaint.
I know, I get it.
It
Karaoke.
usually is a complaint when it comes to noise.
Yeah, for good karaoke, and I've heard bad karaoke.
Yeah.
Again, we're trying to come up with conditions that we don't know if they're acceptable or not. I think under Robert's rules, anyone that voted no today at the next meeting, which is only 2 weeks, can ask for a motion for reconsideration, and during that time, there can be discussion with the applicant, and let them describe what conditions they're willing to live with. And we're not then trying to prescribe things that I'm not comfortable with.
Okay.
And they have to go to council also for approval, so we're
Right.
just making a recommendation here.
And that's another idea,
Mm.
other than what Jim has just said, to table this discussion to our next meeting.
I'll make one more motion. I'll make a motion to allow the special exception to have live music with the conditions, temporarily, to allow live music with the conditions of no drums and in the bands, and for the manager to be given a decimal meter to keep track of what's happening and have a chart where you monitor that, where you can show us what you're doing. And that the hours be till 7 o'clock on weekdays and 9 o'clock on weekends. That's my motion.
Is there a second for that motion?
You have to put consumption in there too, because that
Oh,
was.
consumption also.
Is there a second for that motion? Hearing no second, the motion.
Second
Oh,
for
okay.
discussion purposes.
Discussion?
I appreciate
Would you,
Jane's attempts, but it's just, we're struggling to define the conditions, and I just don't think we're knowledgeable enough to really put the right conditions on this.
Yeah.
I also, if I may, to the extent that you're discussing the motion, Ms. Plummer stated temporary, and can you define the time period?
Okay,
You know,
6 months.
6 months.
Do you agree, Patrick?
would you be willing to go 6 months or
It's like
whatever
we're
is soonest with regards to, I'm offering a friendly amendment. She can amend her motion.
So that should they shut down to rebuild, then it would end
Yeah,
at that time.
if they start
Yeah,
rebuilding
whichever
in
is
3
sooner.
months,
Yes.
that ends it sooner. And also, I'm still sticking to the 6:30, and then they can have acoustic into the evening.
Okay.
And
You know, I heard the people say that they like the whale, they support the whale, they just don't like the really loud.
Amplified.
And he's already said he's willing to work on it. He's a new owner, he hasn't proven himself yet, but I think they got good neighbors, and they want it to survive, and this is a situation that if we shut him down, can he make it? I mean, we're not responsible for making people survive on this island, but I'd sure like to see it happen. So it is a temporary thing. They do have to come back before us for the hard building to be built and the new conditions. And I think this is a way for the neighbors to work together and come to an understanding of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
Jane, are you accepting Patrick's amendment?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So it's 6:30, and non-acoustical could go on afterwards.
No, acoustic.
Acoustic, I'm sorry.
Non-amplified is what you're saying, right?
Non-amplified afterwards.
Jason, did you have?
Yeah, just a clarification from what I've heard on this motion real quick. Would that be 6:30 PM on all days, including?
Weekdays and 9 o'clock on weekends.
9 PM on
And
weekends?
holidays.
9 PM holidays and weekends. And are we considering Friday, Saturday?
Friday, Saturday.
Okay. And then you had mentioned that we would be giving the manager a decibel meter.
No, not we. The owners would provide the manager a decibel meter, and he will do that throughout the night.
I don't know how feasible it is, but can they get it sort of geared up and the decibel meter by the sheriff's office? Who's going to be responsible for making sure the decibel meter is calibrated properly?
I would take that out of there, Jane. I mean,
Okay. I withdraw that because it's hard to monitor.
Can we, when we get done here, can you read the motion again so I know what I'm voting on?
Sure.
Thank you.
Then we have the
Maybe the
temporary
town attorney
nature
can tell me.
also.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the motion is to approve the amending of the special exception with the following conditions. It be temporary to either the time that the construction begins, and they would have to close their facility anyway, or 6 months. That it would require a condition of no drums in the bands, that the hours would be till music could go on, music and alcohol could go on through, alcohol would be approved for the hours that they're open, but music would be until 6:30 on weekdays and 9 o'clock on weekends and holidays, Friday and Saturday being the weekend. And that's it.
And I think you said non-amplified.
Oh, and non-amplified can be afterwards,
After 6:30.
6:30.
Did you mention for a period of?
I did 6 months or
6 months or
when they
until-
start
okay.
construction, yes.
Okay. So that's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion by Jane and seconded by Scott. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Your vote, Jane?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Doug?
I'll go aye.
No.
Okay.
Motion carries 6-1. All right, next item
I'll
on
be
the agenda.
checking on you guys.
The next item on the agenda is requesting relief and variance from LDC Table 34-3, which requires that lots in the RS zoning district have minimum dimensions of 75 by 100 feet. Jason?
Thank you. Jason Smalley, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department. So as was just read out, what the applicant is asking for here is a variance to the minimum lot sizes in a residential single-family zone, which currently are 75 by 100, to develop as a single-family lot, or to develop it to be developed with a home. The applicant has a single property that is currently compliant as a single property, and the dimensions on that are, I believe, 92 and a half wide and 110 deep. So the applicant is asking to change or variance the minimum width of a lot to allow him to split this single lot as it currently exists into 2 buildable lots. The history of the lot is that, or the lots, is that these were originally platted as 53 feet by 110 feet. The code allows somebody to go back to non-compliant lot dimensions if they were originally platted that way. So the rub with this applicant is that he cannot go back to the previous dimensions, because at some point prior to their ownership, a portion of the lot was dedicated to a different lot. We don't have a whole lot of history on when that happened or who initiated that. But the point is that the original platted dimensions no longer exist. You cannot make them exist anymore. So he's asking to reduce the width of today's dimensions to allow him to rebuild 2 lots with 2 single-family homes on it. The current conditions as they exist are that the lot has multiple structures on it. It is pretty much hardscaped, so there really is no pervious area on the site. To our best understanding, it does not meet the 40% coverage maximums, nor does it meet the 67% impervious maximums for development of a new lot. If these lots were developed as single-family homes, they would have to meet all of today's conditions, and that would include those limitations on coverage, imperviousness, setbacks, heights, all of it. They would be required to come into compliance. So effectively, the owner wants to create two smaller lots. The rest of the lots in the neighborhood were originally platted at roughly 53 feet wide. Some of those continue to exist, but a lot of them have been combined over the years, so you're seeing lots that are more in line with the 75 by 100 standard as it exists today. I'm open to any questions. I do want to make one clarification in the staff report, if I may. I think there was one point that was a little bit unclear. To go back to the original, the applicant is proposing a width of 46.25 feet as of today, or he would like to have two lots that are 46.25 feet. The original platting was at 53 feet, so if they could have gone back to that, that was a difference of about 6.7 feet. If we are comparing today what they would be required under current code to hit, there's a difference of about 28.75 feet between the 75 by 100 lots that are requested today to develop and what they're proposing. So just so we have all of the numbers out there about the difference between the lot sizes. I know there's going to be some questions here, so I'm entirely open to
Just stay
anything
right
you
there,
have.
but first I'm going to ask for ex parte communication. Don?
No.
Patrick?
Nope.
Jane?
I had an elevator conversation with the owners.
Okay. Scott?
No.
Jim?
No.
Don? Doug?
No ex parte.
I don't have any either. Okay, and so Jason, what is the staff recommendation on this?
The staff has recommended approval mainly based on the fact that the comprehensive plan gives us an idea of what these neighborhoods were intended to be developed as. So without a variance, it's going to continue to more than likely be a multifamily or short-term rental that wouldn't be allowed under today's code to develop a duplex, for instance, in that neighborhood. So we're looking at it going back to the intent of what the neighborhood was to allow for development of single-family homes, noting that this change in the lot to where they can't bring it back to the previous plat was something that occurred prior to the current owner buying the property. We believe that in and of itself is a hardship not created by the owner.
Very good. Thank you very much. Questions for Jason? Don?
My only question is in the rendition or the proposal of what it would look like. I mean, we're not being asked. We're really just being asked to allow splitting of the lot. There's nothing to do with the setbacks or the
Correct.
actual proposed structure or anything. Okay.
Yeah, great point. Yes,
Yeah.
The dimensions and the possible setbacks, we haven't looked at them, and
Okay.
that isn't part of this discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got multiple questions.
Okay.
So, first question is, how many legal units are on the property right now?
So it was stated that this was a duplex or used as a short-term rental. It's been hard for us to verify that with LIPA because for some reason LIPA's records for this property don't come up. There's some sort of problem on the back end. It's a server problem. I know it existed at one point because I know I've seen it before. But the applicant states that this was a duplex before. We're willing to take him at face value. It appears that that's what it was being used as.
So, assuming there's 2 units on that property, could they rebuild the 2 units on one lot?
So they could, If we were to verify the number of dwelling units that existed there prior, we would follow the same process as before, where they could develop a single-family home and a second dwelling unit in there, as long as it met the codes. We would not allow for a separated building similar to what they have now. It's a very weird design. There seems to be some flat panels that were added after the fact to sort of connect some of the properties, but I don't believe that they're structurally connected, all of them. So I think to answer your question, they could get a second dwelling unit, perhaps, a lock-off or a mother-in-law's quarters inside of the single-family home. But the way that it exists today, where it's got an L shape and at least seemingly 3 buildings that are on the site, that wouldn't be allowed to be developed today.
And I had looked at something similar to this years ago on the island. Have you looked, there's some provisions that say something about if you had 2 lots, but then you build basically on those 2 lots and straddle that boundary, that you're prohibited to go back and change it?
I'm not particularly familiar with that, but I would be more than happy to take a look at it.
I think,
There is history.
I think there's a section there of the code that says that. So I think
It's
Madam
not
Chair?
being used anymore, I can tell you that.
Yeah,
But-
Madam
but
Chair.
it's there.
It's there, but
Hold
nobody,
on, John?
What Mr. Van Ness is talking about is, someone that combines 2 non-conforming lots into a large one single lot and builds across them. Generally, most codes require the filing of what's called a unity of title, where now that is recognized as one buildable lot unless that unity of title is released, which generally is not released unless under very specific circumstances. In reviewing the staff report, in reading the staff report, I did ask staff to identify what section of the code, because I wasn't aware of it, that says you get to revert back to, because, it's my general understanding is that once you combine 2 lots, that's it. I mean, that's the idea is then to make those 2 substandard lots now a standard lot, and we don't want to go back and undo that. So, maybe, I know the applicant is here, but I don't know the answer, frankly, off the top of my head, and I would have to look into it, because I don't disagree that there may be a code section that says you take 2 lots, you join them, you can't undo that, whereas the staff report says you have the right to go back to what was the previously platted lot.
Yeah, my understanding is that this going back, so I've got a lot of concerns, because I think this seems counter to currently what the code says, and also, even from a comp plan standpoint, in that you got 1 lot, now you're creating 2. Maybe if they met the reversion provisions, meaning that they go back to what was platted, but they're not going back to what was platted, they're going to somewhat less. So now really you're creating 2 lots, okay? Where it's not just reverting back, you are taking an existing lot, you're creating 2, you don't meet the density requirement.
So the density ostensibly was 2, where there were 2 lots there originally. And so when it was combined, I don't know the process by which they figured out, whether it met density at the time that the town came into being. But our view is that you're looking at going back to the plats as they existed in 1950, or you're looking at going back to making 2 lots allowable with 1 density unit on each as it existed in the 53 or 54 plat.
But right now, the code says 75 feet, doesn't meet that.
Correct.
Then we say you could possibly revert back to what the plat says, we don't meet the plan.
Right.
And now, so you're creating 2 new lots, essentially, because you're not reverting back. If I were to create lots, I'm starting a process from scratch where I have to demonstrate that I'm consistent with the future land use and the allowed density. And if you take, is it 6 units per acre over there?
I believe it's actually 4.
4? Divide that
Low
by
density.
43560, that's your minimum lot size.
Right.
And they don't meet that. So I just don't even see how we can even consider this.
well, I will tell you that I was around back when they made that provision. I thought it was a taking of right then when they made it the statement that if your home commingles your two properties, you now have one property, period. And since that was approved, I can tell you at least 20 off the top of my head that have been approved on this island to split the lot and make two houses. So it is a total ignored thing. It should be fixed in the glitch situation because back in the day, it only like affected, that they could come up with maybe 20 properties that it would affect. But now that we have a clean slate with all these individual lots on properties that had multifamily houses, it's popping up all over where there's two single-family houses.
So Jane, when you say they combined them and went back, did they meet the requirements of those lots though?
No.
So they were still not, so they created two nonconformities.
Well, I believe some of them did, yes. I mean, I didn't have time to pull them up, but I wanted to ask the question,
And I think
what
there's a
is
distinction if
the
there's
distinction?
two legal lots and you combine them, you go back, yes, but if you're knowingly creating nonconformities, that's where, just from a planning standpoint, I've got a problem, and what I've always told people is, we're trying to get the yes here and help people out.
Right.
And if someone's got an existing lot with an existing home, and we have to make concessions on setbacks, different things like this, but we're taking something right now, and we are exacerbating the issue by creating two nonconformities. Not only does it not comply with today's code, doesn't even comply to the reversion of the original plat.
So what is the dimension of being able to split a lot and have it be?
Under RS zoning currently, you would need to have a 75-foot wide by 100 deep lot to
Even
have
if
it
they were
compliant.
original 50-foot plotted lots?
No, you can go back to the original plats. So in this case, it was 53 wide by 110 was the original platting of this neighborhood. Unfortunately, you cannot create two lots because a portion of it was split off to another lot in the past. So you cannot create even the 53 by 110 lots.
That's what Patrick said.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Jason? Then we'll hear from the applicant. Doug?
Yeah, and maybe this will be a question for the applicant, but we've heard testimony in previous hearings that the minimum width of a reasonable dwelling is like 30 feet or something, and here I'm looking at one that's 21 and a half feet wide. And I'm kind of be nice to see a floor plan or something that actually makes that work, because I suspect, and I may be, excuse me if I'm speaking out of turn to the owners, but if we approve splitting the lot into two non-conforming lots, and the next thing we're going to be asked to do at some point in the future is waive setback limits on the sides, because I don't see how you can build a 21 and a half foot wide house.
So this was my mention earlier, is that we really didn't get into discussing what the setbacks would be, but the setbacks that are provided in this example are, I think, under the previous code where it was 15%. I haven't done the math, but the point being, at these dimensions, they would be required to hit 7.5 foot side setbacks. So in actuality, you would be looking at a 31 foot wide house. You could maximize it at 31 feet with 15 feet on the sides
Okay.
taken for setbacks.
Okay, thanks, that helps.
Any other questions for Jason? Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Lonnie?
I'd like to start by thanking you for your time today. Some of the questions.
Lonnie,
that-
wait, say your name for the
Oh,
record.
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
I think
Lonnie
most of us
Lettieri.
know you, but
Sorry about that. My name is Lonnie Lettieri. I reside at 4830 Coral Road. That's the property that we're speaking about. It's been my primary residence for 21 years now. until Ian took it away. If you don't mind, I'd like to pass out
Sure.
some pamphlets for everybody.
Thank you.
Jason, just
Thank you.
anything about?
Thanks, Lon.
Lonnie, will you give one to John and maybe give one to Jason? He's got one, okay.
We're good.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, I'm sorry, you guys got the wrong ones.
What? These are fair weather.
I'm sorry.
What happened?
This is
Here.
fair weather as well.
Yeah, this is,
Here, send it this way.
I'm sorry.
That's all right?
It's okay.
Bottom one's on top,
Yeah.
on bottom. You- I believe Jason- I apologize. After the first hearing with Zeller's family, I had a little bit of anxiety, feeling I was unprepared.
Oh, no, you don't worry about it, you're fine.
All right.
It's friendly fire at least, Lonnie.
Friendly fire, okay. So in the beginning, the very first is the plat, which we already discussed. These are, almost every lot is 53 feet deep, with the exceptions of a couple on the back bay. I included a survey that kind of shows you a layout. If you go to the existing layouts, we highlighted where the property is from an aerial view, so you can kind of see how it was laid out. As he stated, I'd say close to 90% of this property in the existing layout was impervious. It's mostly concrete. The back house stretched all the way across the back lot line. I believe it was close to about 5 feet, 4 foot 8 inch, I believe. That is the one structure. There is the front structure as well, which is about, I believe, 6 feet from the setback, and then there is a garage that's in between. You cannot get into house from a garage. So they were 2 single-family houses. There's some pictures as well of the front of the house from the roadway, and because it's such a unique, weird property, this property, even though we love the neighborhood and it served its purpose, has been a bit of the ugly duckling in the neighborhood, and that's what we're trying to rectify. We'd like to get rid of the short-term rental look of like an Airbnb style layout, which is what it's been since I purchased it, with some, small shining it up. No revisions were made except for the swimming pool, which was installed probably about 17 years ago. And then the roof part that was included with the pool and the permit when we pulled that. Moving forward, there's some proof that we had 2 separate water meters, 2 separate FPL accounts, 2 separate taps for the sewage on this property. When we purchased it originally, it was a mess. There's 3 different single men living in the front house with no power and water. I think for up to 3 months. There was 2 inches of maggots in the stove and the refrigerator until we were able to legally move them out. The back was a short-term rental, which is not favorable to the neighborhood as well. This is a zoned residential neighborhood. So that's all we are trying to do, is just match the footprint of the neighborhood, knowing that each lot would be approximately 6 feet shorter than the rest of, not shorter, less wide. If you keep thumbing through, you'll see kind of renderings of what we would like to do. It is well inside the pervious count. The setbacks of 7.5 foot, 25 to the front, 20 to the rear. The rear being one of the worst problems. We are window to window to our neighbors, and I don't think anybody liked it. As you'll see in the back of the There's a little further way view, and then we did an aerial view that kind of show the setbacks of the plans that we would like to do. We do not have the interior layout done. It is in black lines right now with the company to have all the inside and everything. We have it designed in our head, but we're waiting for it on paper. And then past the aerial view are all the adjacent neighbors, including the ones on both sides. In front of us, basically the whole neighborhood on that street wrote letters of approval in their favor. They believe that it'll be aesthetically more pleasing to them. It'll eliminate the family status that it has on Lipa right now in a residentially zoned neighborhood. So we're just trying to be proactive in making this neighborhood all look like it's unified. It was relieving in the earlier hearings to hear that, you know, you're fighting for and your main goal is to bring back families to this neighborhood. My mother lost her house a couple doors down. She's 85 years old. We're hoping to build a separate house and a separate lot for her and my fiance's parents as well, so that we can move them back. We don't believe that her house is fixable and that she has the time to actually enjoy it when she does get back. So these are our plans.
Okay, thank you, Lonnie. Are there any questions for the applicant? Doug, did you?
The one packet that I accidentally gave you guys first, I'm sorry to interrupt,
That's all right.
was comparable to properties, which I believe Jane was talking about. We have 3 in a very short time. I didn't even really dig into it very deep. We have a house at Connecticut and Shellmont behind that, Woodland Homes built on a property that had 56 feet of road frontage, only 100 wide or deep, but going to 33 feet in the back, which I believe the rule states, and correct me if you're wrong because so many words in those rule books, it's kind of Chinese to me. I believe you add them together and then divide them by 2, and that's how they get the width of the actual property, which brings that specific property to 44 feet wide. We have a couple other comparables, and I can hand those out as well, of similar situations where it was not 2 structures with separate FPL accounts and everything. It was one structure, and they were able to take that after the storm probably took it away, re-subdivide these lots back into 2 lots. These were already 2 houses with 2 separate meters and that situation. But the way that it was laid out, we've never been happy with. It does scream short-term rental, which doesn't really help the neighborhood.
What did you do with your pool? Did you take it out?
The pool's still there. Unfortunately, we did qualify for debris removal. My attorney does not want us to remove it yet because they're still fighting over insurance money. Can you believe with the damage?
I know.
I mean, you think it would be an automatic. We're paying mortgage payments on 2 properties that have escrowed insurance, very large insurance bills, on properties that are unlivable to companies that are not paying us.
It's almost insulting, isn't it?
It's, I don't know how it's legal. It should be illegal, but
I don't have a
unfortunately,
ticket
I'm
either.
not the only one in this room with that
Right,
problem.
no,
I know
you're
we
not.
are
Yeah,
all
I've heard
fighting.
that from
I've really
others.
tried to keep this about
Yep.
just trying to conform these properties, even though there's a few feet less on each of them. But I think our plans show that we will be inside the new building codes. I know that the building codes were put there for a reason, and that's what we want to do.
Doug?
Well, I was just, yeah, I had a question in my mind as why is there 2 different size houses, but then I think I get it, because sounds like you're building one for yourself and one for your mother. Yeah.
Lonnie, hold on. You have to talk at the microphone. That's okay. Just want to make sure we get you on the record.
Yes, sorry. That is our plan.
Well, I applaud the pervious area and the green space that you're attempting to achieve there.
Yeah, it's much better than the
And
pure
it
concrete.
certainly is a huge improvement over what was there.
And I believe my neighbors feel the same way, which is why they all took the time to write. Many of them would be here. One of them's in Europe. It is a very elderly community. A lot of them have second homes that they go back to, especially now. There's no reason for them to be here. I do a lot for them as well, because they are elderly. After work, I try to help them out as much as possible in the neighborhood.
Okay, other questions for Lonnie? Patrick?
Lonnie, have you explored rebuilding the property with 2 units but without 2 separate lots?
I have, because I've been working with Jason, and I feel the same as the first gentleman, that he has been extreme asset to Fort Myers Beach, very helpful. I'm also a sign contractor here, so I've, for years, been pulling permits and dealt with the building department. And with all the garbage that you can see right out this window, I can't believe how on the spot our building department has been, especially recently. But yes, we have explored that. It still makes it a multi-tenant situation in a residentially zoned neighborhood, which is what we're trying to get away from. As we're talking, we do want to build a house that our elderly parents can live in, but everything's temporary, including life itself. And we're getting older as well. Our kids are in college, even past it. I don't believe that we would really utilize a very large structure with a mother-in-law apartment. I think that this would probably be the best layout plan for the neighborhood and our neighbors.
Well, it appears that all of the homes on your street, based on, I think our slide, really do line up with just single families going down the road. And the fact that the property was portioned off before you bought it, is that correct?
I believe the large house on the blue
Mhm.
is the one that took, I don't have the numbers
But it
exactly. I
wasn't
think it was
something that you
13.
did. You didn't
Oh,
sell off a
no,
portion.
no, and in fact, as far back as we dug, that was already done. But the plat records from 1955 that I got at the Lee County Tax Collector Office shows that they were, in fact, that way.
And I appreciate the fact that you brought this other little package here, because I do find it interesting, and actually
do I.
questioned lots of the properties myself, why we didn't see them, why they didn't come before us to ask the question about splitting their commingled lot into 2 homes. And so, and this one has a 48-foot, and a 45-foot lot. So I think that there's history here, and I do feel that the clause that was put into our rules no longer exists and should be removed, because it's certainly not being observed. So I understand where you're coming from.
And this is not necessarily a question for the applicant, but more in response to Jane and the rest of the group here is, I want us to get to yes. Just from a pure regulatory standpoint, I just don't see it now. There's so many things. First of all, Jane, the fact that a jurisdiction made a mistake in the past does not obviate us from following the code in the future.
Well, that's
And if the code's wrong, you change the code.
That's what I'm saying, it should be
Yeah,
removed.
and that's it, that we should change the code if that's the case. And the other thing is, we're not only changing the dimensions, the other thing, again, we've got an application here that the way it's presented to us is not even complete from the standpoint of, there's a lot area that they don't meet on top of that. And the application is not for a reduction in lot area, it's just for dimension. We don't have a ripe application again coming before us. So I've got trouble getting around the fact that doesn't meet the 75, doesn't meet the revision clauses, doesn't meet the fact that we have regulations that say if you build on 2 lots, then you can't go back. And if it's really the creation of 2 new lots, it would have to meet density and it doesn't meet density requirements. I just don't see, as a professional planner that understands these rules, how I can support that. I want them to be able to build 2 units. We do provide protection for existing units, they can build them back. You build them back as multifamily, they still get their units, and it's not conforming. It was there before, they retain the right, it stays non-conforming. But for so many rules that we have to ignore to get this approved, and I'm actually surprised that we have a recommendation for approval for this.
It's because it happens all the time.
If I may add, this is my primary residence. This is not for profit reasons, which some of the ones in the comparables were builders that sold their build-out afterward and during their build.
You know what? You are a lovely human being. You've been here a long time, but unfortunately, what Patrick is saying is true. And so our desire to say, Lonnie, you're a good guy. We know you live here. We know what you want to do. We get the big picture. You want to build this this mother-in-law house or whatever. The rules say no. But Jason, I want you to come back up here, because with all the praise you're getting today, I want to know why. Why, you know, Patrick used a word ripe. It's like what I want to do right this second is table this, because I don't want to tell you no. I want to see if there's a better plan.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you that plan because that's not our role. But it's, you know, I'm not going to be able to overcome Patrick's objections because unfortunately or fortunately, Lonnie has provided us with things that I question every day. How did this happen? How
Without
did, I
coming
mean,
before us.
at the top of my street, the Jefferson Street Estero, how did that happen? And so, you know, if no one was looking or whatever, I don't know what makes Lonnie's property different from 3507 Estero. And so maybe I don't even want to ask you a question, because I don't want to say something that sounds like I'm, you know, punching you, because I think you're marvelous. But I mean, would there be any inclination from the board to table this to our June 27th meeting to see if, hearing these comments, if the applicant and staff can either come back and say, no, this is what I want, say yes or no,
Find a solution.
or you find a solution?
I'm more than happy to take it back.
I would agree with that, Anita, and I was kind of open-minded about this until Patrick educated me on all of these things, which I have to agree with Patrick. It's a lot of hurdles to jump over.
It almost feels like we can't overcome it unless it's just because here you've got a great resident
But
that
I-
we want, and our whole push has been make residents whole again. Oh God, that sounds like a campaign slogan. But to help people get back in their homes and rebuild their futures.
So I would agree. Let's table it and take another look at it and work with Jason and.
Well, back in the day, I have a question, if, like,
I think we're
the
still
property at the end of Palermo Circle that is on the right-hand turn after you've gone to the end of the street, Torgeson's are here and the Target house is here, the Target house. They got 2 houses by making a arch to connect them.
So you know what? This is something that you should call Lonnie and tell him about,
Okay.
but that we shouldn't have here.
Okay, but wait a minute, one of my questions is,
But that's it. I think there might be some solutions on one lot.
There might be some solutions.
So I think I agree with Anita completely. Don't want to say no.
Don't want to say no,
But obviously, as a professional planner, I've got knowledge of this, and I just can't look away from that, unfortunately. But I think there might be some solutions there if you work with staff.
Sure, you certainly may.
I believe that this is the only property in Holiday Shores that's zoned multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the neighborhood doesn't want that because of the element that was in and out of it. They want it to go to a residential single-family situation.
Honey, that doesn't overcome our rule.
Mhm.
It'd be great if it did. It would really be great if it did, but it doesn't.
Gotcha.
But there's still an open door here.
Mhm.
So if we make a motion to table this to a date certain of June 27th, because we have a second meeting this month, it gives you 2 weeks to sit with Jason 24/7.
Have a good weekend.
And come up
Sure,
with
he's got
some-
plenty of time.
I'm sure, but you know he's a good guy. And come up with something that might work for you, that fits this rule. Okay?
Fits the
and of
rule,
course-
meaning?
Of course, you can contact any one of
Yeah,
us
Okay.
in
Oop,
between now
sorry.
and then to talk to us about the objections, and then we would just disclose that at the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Alrighty.
Okay. So I would make a motion to table, no, wait, I have to open public hearing first. Okay.
Yeah,
are you-
we should
Yeah.
hear
Let's see if
those that
somebody has
came.
anything else to say about it. Does anybody have any comment? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to make a motion to table this case until a date certain of June 27th, and to direct staff to work with the applicant to hopefully achieve his goals.
Seconded.
I would say.
Is there any
Good.
discussion on that? Hearing none, Jane, your vote?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Don has stepped out for a moment, so he's not voting, and I'll say aye, so carries unanimously, so we'll see you back on the 27th.
Let's
Okay?
give him back these packages so he doesn't have
Yep.
to reinvent them.
You're welcome.
And I dropped my
Okay.
card over the edge if you want to give me a call.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be a good idea. Okay. Next item on the agenda is we're going back to square one for the variance request from LDC Section 34-638 and LDC Table 34-3 for front setbacks and corner lot setbacks. And Jacob, can you come and show me? I've forgotten after all of this what I'm supposed to do with the phone. And may I have ex parte communication, please? Scott?
I've already filed paperwork that I'm recusing myself from this hearing. The property is in my wife's trust, so I'm recusing myself.
Okay.
Now, I just want to make some clarity. I can still be in discussion, I just can't vote.
You can still be present and
Okay.
still be, participate in the
Okay.
discussion.
But he has to
I,
unmute. Okay.
it's my recommendation.
Just go there.
That you refrain, you don't want to give this, the
I'm just gonna
appearance.
sit over there.
Then that's perfectly fine, but you don't have to leave. You
Yeah.
can stay here, so.
Jane, will you move the microphone over here?
Sure.
And make sure that you get with the clerk to fill out the appropriate form. Great.
Okay, Doug, do you have any ex parte?
No, ma'am.
And how about you, Jim?
No.
Jane? Patrick?
Yes, I spoke with Jackie about the case.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I did have a conversation with Jackie. I forgot.
I didn't have a conversation with Jackie, but I went to the property. So, and it's a pretty high visibility property. Samir, you want to tell your person to unmute, because they're muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Drew?
Jason, is that picking up? Drew, will you say something again?
Yes, hello.
Is that good, Jason? Jacob? Hold on, Drew.
No problem.
Drew, could you speak again?
Yes, hello, testing.
There.
Testing.
Okay, that's perfect. All right, Drew.
Oh, that's better. I was getting feedback initially. That it's much more clear for me. Thank you.
All right, stand by.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, Jason, would you like to make your presentation, and then we'll have the applicant.
Okay.
Jason Smalley, Senior Planner, Community Development. So the ask today is in regards to 106 Hibiscus. There are 3 requested variances that are necessary, that have been requested. The first one is a variance to the very recent corner lot code amendments. I'll call it a rewrite, and that states that if you are on Estero, you must declare that Estero is the street setback, the primary street setback with 25-foot setbacks. So part of their request is to instead have the 25-foot setback on Hibiscus rather than Estero. So that would require a variance to that code language, necessitating Estero be considered the street. The second request would be a reduction of the street setback, and this would be considered Hibiscus, 9.9 feet 2 inches to allow ultimately for a street setback of 15 feet 10 inches. The second setback that they are requesting is a reduction of the side setbacks by 2 feet. Currently, they would be required to have a side setback of 7.5, and so at this point, they're requesting a 5.5 foot setback. That again is all wrapped up in this idea of changing what is considered to be the street setback to Hibiscus, considering the secondary street setback to then be Estero. Opposite Hibiscus would be considered their rear, and then the lot to the that's adjacent with the neighbor on Hibiscus would then be considered the side setback. So it's a sort of reimagining of what we call the setbacks, and then two reduction asks. If there are any questions, I'm here to answer those. Otherwise, the applicant and their designers are here to provide information as well.
Okay. Questions for Jason? I just, wouldn't there be some, maybe this is a figment of my imagination because that happens regularly lately, but isn't there something about eliminating driveways on Estero Boulevard that would be a benefit here, shifting the focus of the property? Or no, that just is subjective?
So I think that's mainly in reference to commercial redevelopment, but I take your point, less curb cuts onto Estero
That's the word I meant.
are always going to be better. The way that they could design the site wouldn't necessarily require that they make a curb cut on Estero. It would just be for considerations of what a 25-foot street setback would be. The code just said corner lots would necessitate Estero having that designation as the street setback, and then the secondary would be Hibiscus in this case. I don't know offhand if they currently have a curb cut on Estero. Is that?
No, and now that I'm visualizing the property, they don't. But I'm having a hard time. You've recommended to deny the variance to treat Hibiscus as the frontage, and why is that?
So I did not write this staff report, but I think it's just a matter of the code itself calls for Estero being designated as that.
Okay.
And our understanding, and this is going to require some hunting for intent from the town council, which I don't like to do, but I believe it was more in line with trying to make sure that all of the houses that are on Estero have a similar setback and provide a similar look.
Got it.
That you didn't want some houses that seem to be.
I think that's probably true. Okay.
Well, provided that the address is on Hibiscus, we just made up this new rule about corner setbacks on Estero Boulevard, so we don't know really how many people. Well, we did define it, and we made it up, and we don't know how many people that's going to affect, especially because this lot is a odd design. So we're dealing with odd shape. The address is on Hibiscus, hard to say that the front isn't Hibiscus if that's where the driveway is and the address is. But I get the idea of we want Estero to be in conformity, but if it means that the house is not buildable, it doesn't help put a house on that on property. So I'm willing to look at the house as a Hibiscus address being the front. And I'm open to it. I'll wait to hear the applicant.
Yeah, I had a question. In reviewing this, and just like to get that clarified before the applicant makes their presentation. With their request, they're asking Hibiscus to be the primary street setback. The secondary street setback would be Estero. And it's based on the width. And so if we look at, primary is not, the primary setback is 25 no matter what, or there's no base on width? Okay. Got it. Just wanted to make sure, because I for some reason I was thinking that if we were looking at the width of the Hibiscus frontage, we had to do an average of the front and the back, not just.
Yeah, I think the code calls for the or what would be considered to be the primary setback when determining the lot width of a corner lot. That was slightly changed in the new code that came down, but the analysis was that it would be a 7.5-foot setback just based on the width of that lot on one frontage, not an average across both of them, which could have been the case. You could have made that case under the previous code, but I think Sarah's language has tightened that up a little bit.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions, or should we go to the applicant? Thank you, Jason. Samir? And Drew? Just for the record, what is Drew's last name? Whiting. Drew Whiting is appearing by phone/Zoom or whatever. He's appearing invisibly.
Telephonically.
Oh, what'd you say?
Telephonically.
Telephonically. They're good. Another good word, John.
Thank you for that introduction, everyone.
Oh, you're very welcome, Drew.
I'll kick this off and then turn it over to you. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Samir Malviel, though this is my 5th LPA meeting in a row, so I'm guessing people do know who I am.
Pretty soon we'll let you sit up here, Samir.
I actually had a name tag made already. So I work with a homebound, a semi-custom builder here in Fort Myers Beach that's working with 50-plus homeowners up and down the beach. Joined today by our Director of Construction Operations, Ernie Jamie, our Project Manager, Vito Polsinelli, and of course, our internal architect, Drew Whiting, who's on the phone. The variance application we're here to discuss is 106 Hibiscus Drive, located at the southwest corner of Hibiscus and Estero Boulevard. When conducting the initial site feasibility for this lot, as we do on every project that we work on, we're very surprised to learn that the front property line is oriented toward Estero Boulevard. When applying the front and rear setbacks to this orientation, we realized that this condition would seriously impede the homeowner's ability to build back. My colleague Drew will walk you through a series of diagrams that you have in front of you to explain our variance and how we arrived at our proposal. You'll see that if this variance is granted, we will end up with a buildable area of 1,910 square feet, which is in line with the buildable footprint of a rectangular-shaped 50 by 100 lot, despite this lot being 1,100 square feet larger. Furthermore, we'll end up with building dimensions of 32 by 40, which is very much in line with the building dimensions of the original home, which was 32 by 44. Closing, I'd like to let the LPA know we have obtained letters of support for the variance application from neighbors at 112 Hibiscus, 122 Hibiscus, 174 Hibiscus, 196 Hibiscus, and 3850 Estero, which is directly across the street. Drew, take it away, buddy.
Drew?
Hi, Drew Whiting with Homebound. Okay, so the first thing that I want to kind of give some background to this, as you guys kind of already mentioned a little bit, the new corner lot setbacks ordinance that was passed recently. The first couple pages are showing kind of stretches of Estero Boulevard along the island. And you'll notice the majority of these lots, this ordinance works really well for, where they are oriented with the short dimension on Estero Boulevard and the longer dimension perpendicular to it. So meaning that your front and rear setbacks that are taking a larger percentage of your lot with that 25-foot front setback and your 20-foot rear setback are taken away from that long dimension. As we get to page 3, which is captioned map 5, we're now looking at the subject property along with a few additional lots on either side of it on the stretch basically from Gulf Island Drive to Baymar Drive on that north side of Estero. We get a few rare lots that are actually oriented towards their side street. So as I think Anita already mentioned, their driveways are oriented towards the side street and the existing houses, and dimensionally, they're oriented towards that driveway as well. The point that I want to make with this is when we get to Exhibit A on page 5, so now shifting to that first diagram in your packet, we can see what the current setbacks, strictly reading from the corner lot setback ordinance, would do to your buildable area and how constrained that is from a width perspective.
Yeah. It's the
Even
first
at its
diagram,
widest
it looks like a
point,
survey.
we're at 24 feet 8 inches, and that quickly tapers down as it goes back deeper on the lot. If we shift over to Exhibit B on page 6, and just to give a little bit of context here, I'm just going to kind of step us through each of these variances. I think they individually don't make a lot of sense necessarily, but as you kind of see the whole picture, it helps to build why they're all necessary here. So as we shift to the next page with Exhibit B, we're now looking at what staff is suggesting to approve, where we're rotating or flipping the interior side setback and the rear setback. And now you're seeing that the shape of the lot is getting a little more proportional to what we would expect to see, and essentially orienting us a little more towards that Hibiscus Drive frontage and a little bit less towards the Estero Boulevard frontage. With that being said, I wanted to draw the comparison here that this lot, in the bottom right corner, I did a little bit of an area takeoff between this lot versus a typical 50 by 100 foot lot that you would see on the island, where the lot area is 6,125 feet, which is roughly 1,125 square feet larger than that 50 by 100 foot lot. However, the buildable area is actually about 500 square feet less, with 1,436 square feet versus 1,925 square feet. And that's because of this extra strain from the larger side setbacks or larger setbacks along the street frontage, in addition to the kind of odd shape of this particular lot. If we want to shift to our next page, we can see on Exhibit C, the previous existing single-family residence was not consistent with the LDC setback requirements, as I believe staff mentions in the report. And in fact, we're actually encroaching on the front setback off of Estero, the street side setback on Hibiscus, the interior side setbacks facing 112 Hibiscus, and the structure was only 3 feet 6 inches away from the existing pool, which we see as a life safety hazard to be that close to the pool when you have a door and a walkway all acting there at the same space. With all that being said, that home, as Samir has already mentioned, was roughly 30 feet by 40 feet in dimension, which is very similar to what we're proposing at 32 feet wide by 40 feet deep, plus decks. Moving on to the next page, thank you for your patience here. We have Exhibit D, and here we're showing the buildable footprint if Hibiscus Drive frontage was made the front setback at 25 feet and the Estero Boulevard frontage was made the street side setback at 20 feet. And this is where I want to now note the conditions that we're seeing on this specific lot that I think are the reason we're asking for some variance or setback variances on top of the rotating of the orientation of the lot. So the first one being our side street setback on a corner lot is going to be based on our street front or our front property line, which is 76.12 feet. That is 1.12 feet greater than 75 feet in which we're then forced to have a 20-foot street side setback. Just as a refresher, from 50 feet to 75 feet, we would have a 15-foot street side setback, and anything at 50 or less would be a 10-foot street side setback. Now, the majority of the lot is going to fall between that 50-foot and 75-foot width, and with that, understand that we would be normally fighting for a 15-foot street side setback. We also want to be cognizant of the fact that the change to the corner lot setbacks with that forced frontage on Estero was intended to have a greater setback off of Estero Boulevard. And so we are trying to maintain a 20-foot street side setback off of Estero Boulevard to maintain as great of a setback there as possible and have a consistent streetscape coming down Estero Boulevard. And that's part of the reason why we're then pushing forward and backward into the lot to towards Hibiscus and toward 112 Hibiscus in order to make that work. The second point I want to point out is the existing pool on the lot constraining the buildable footprint. So normally our 20-foot setback line would be right into about midway through the pool. So to get to the edge of the pool and then keep a minimum of 6 feet away from the primary structure, to make sure that our primary structure foundation isn't conflicting with our pool foundation, so that neither is undermining the other. And secondly, to maintain a safe pool deck width to make sure that there isn't that life safety issue that we were seeing previously. The third point I want to point out is the existing easement that's located along the interior side lot line. And we'll see this on Exhibit E shortly in green, between 106 Hibiscus and 112 Hibiscus, that has historically provided access to 106 Hibiscus by creating an easement right along that side lot line. This easement continues to remain and can be utilized in order to help us reduce that interior side setback and help pull the primary structure away from the Estero Boulevard frontage. The last item before we get to the final proposed combination of all of this is the previous house footprint. So we're, again, 30 feet by 44 feet was the previous house, and that was a result of the construction type and living experience at a slab-on-grade house. Your patios, your yard, your pool space are all at the same living level and creating an extension of your interior living space. With new construction requiring us to elevate the main floor of the house above base flood elevation, we see that there's inherently this need to add decks off of the living floors to create both that indoor-outdoor connection, but also a transition space between the house itself and the yard space around the house. With that, we can shift over to our final exhibit, final page, which is Exhibit E. And this is showing then the proposed house on the lot. So we are pushing with these revised setbacks and the conditions above. The proposed house has a similar footprint to the previous residence with an additional 6-foot deck, both on the Estero Boulevard side and on the rear facing the pool. The house has been pushed 2 feet towards that interior lot line, as has already been mentioned, for a side setback of 5.5 feet. Knowing that this has been a concern previously with fire code, we are maintaining a minimum of 48 inches to the property line when you're accounting for the eave of the house overlapping beyond that setback line, to make sure that we're still keeping an effective distance away from our surrounding neighbors and making sure there isn't that fire concern. In addition, we believe that the easement that's provided here is providing a good buffer line between this house and the neighbor as well. In addition, the house has been pushed forward toward Hibiscus Drive for a reduction of the setback towards Hibiscus of roughly 7 feet 8 inches. This is partially a result of that existing pool pushing the house forward to maintain clearance off of the pool. And although the buildable footprint we've noted has been roughly 10 feet 4 inches that it's pushing away from the pool, we're only taking 7 feet 8 inches of that space in order to, again, try and maintain as much setback as possible. This encroachment is less than the previous house's carport that encroached on this setback as well, which you can see on Exhibit C previously. And finally, I want to note the takeoff in the bottom right corner of Exhibit E here, where we're recognizing that the proposed house aligns much more closely with, but is still less than that typical 50 by 100 foot lot that we've discussed previously, at 1,910 square feet versus the 1,925. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Drew. Could I just let the record reflect that Member Don Suddeth has returned? Don, did you have any ex parte on this?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Drew? I should say the applicant. Any questions for the applicant?
I do. Oh, sorry. Exhibit E is Exhibit E in blue over the green, what was existing? No, that's not it. It's this, it's Exhibit C. Exhibit C has,
It shows the house over the existing, over the previous
Okay.
footprint of the house, yes.
okay. I thought one of these actually showed the new over the old.
Yeah,
That's,
that's Exhibit C, right, Drew?
okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Exhibit C is just showing the old previous house on the current setbacks, and then Exhibit E is showing the proposed house on with the proposed setbacks.
so you would be removing the carport, pushing the pool back so that there's more room to go through around the pool area. And basically, it's almost the exact footprint of what was existing. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Quick question on that. Exhibit E along Estero, the corner of the proposed house, how far is it? We see the 20-foot setback, but you guys are probably very close to that 25 foot, aren't you, at the very corner?
Yes. So at the corner, we're likely over 25 at that corner closest to Hibiscus.
Yep.
And then we approach the 20-foot setback again as the lot tapers back. And then that small green triangle that's shown towards the rear, that's a one-story porch that's wrapping around the house.
Yeah.
One, I think, providing a more broken up and street-worthy elevation to that Hibiscus Boulevard side. But two, is an allowed exception in the code where a porch and stairs coming down can encroach up to 10 feet into that street setback.
Yeah, so where you've got that little triangle where you got the encroachment, that corner of the house, how many feet away is it from?
Yeah, so
Estero?
we're coming down to 16 feet 9 inches off of the Estero Boulevard property line,
But that's-
an encroachment of 3 feet 3 inches beyond that 20-foot setback line.
But that 16.9 is it the house or is it the deck?
The deck.
That is just the deck,
Yeah.
a covered deck.
The house is the darker line, is that correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
So you're greater than, your setback is greater than 16.9, that's my point.
Yeah.
And you're probably very close to 25 right there,
Yes.
correct?
Drew, did you hear that question that Patrick just asked you?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of it.
So your 16.9 measurement seems to be setback from the deck and not the primary structure. And your primary structure is probably very close to 25.
Yes. So the point that I'll note is the part that's coming fully out on the side is a one-story deck that could overlap more. The rear deck that's coming off of the rear side is actually a two-story deck that's giving more outdoor space both off the first and second floor, and that can't encroach on the front setback, and that's why that back corner of where the stair is coming down from that is set back into that.
To your point, Patrick,
That's the part that we're concerned about encroaching on that 20-foot setback line.
16.9 plus that 6 for the deck.
23 feet, more or less.
To your point.
Okay, and you're saying That's something I'm not aware of. You were saying that the fact that it's a two-story deck, it would not be allowed to encroach into the street setback? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. I can get the exact code section here in a moment to help clarify.
And my assumption was you could encroach.
On the second floor.
Yeah,
Yeah, me
it's-
too.
it's a
I thought
deck,
it was a
it's a-
porch.
yeah, it's a porch, it's a
Especially since
deck,
we're
it's-
elevating homes.
And that would be a street setback, not the rear. It
Right.
would be the street, because you got two streets.
Okay, so in section 34638 D2, we have exceptions to street setbacks, in which certain structures are exempt from the street setback requirements as follows. Porches, balconies, and stoops. Porches, balconies, and stoops may extend up to 10 feet into the 25-foot street setback on the first living level of residential buildings, provided that any walls, screened areas, or railings in the setback zone extend no higher than 42 inches above the floor of the porch, balcony, or stoop. No portion of the porch or balcony or walls or screened areas may be closer than 10 feet to the edge of the street, right-of-way, or street easement. And porches, balconies, and stoops, which extend into the front setback, may not exceed 35 feet in width. So the line being that first section where I was saying on the first living level of the residential building.
Well, you just taught me something, thanks.
No problem. We've been very close with these exceptions to see what we can fit here.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, you guys stand by. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Is there any public comment? Yes, sir?
Good afternoon. I
Afternoon.
think we are. For the record, Jackie Lezak, owner, 106 Hibiscus Drive. I've had this home for 21 plus years. For most of that time, the majority of that time, my primary residence. I think what we're trying to do here is to accomplish building back our family home, and while maintaining that Estero front portion. It's desirable that we have a community that has homes along the boulevard that present well and sit back far enough that we have a nice streetscape and a nice view corridor as we're going down the boulevard. We really want to preserve that, but we also need to be able to build a house that is livable and usable with the new setbacks, the new height restrictions, et cetera. And we have already discussed how we will be maintaining that front Estero area to make it look like the front of a home. I think we've always done that since we've lived there. And it's just my understanding, this is one of about 6 or 7 lots that are like this, right along that area of Estero Boulevard. So I'm sure I won't be the last person that you're hearing from with this. And of course, we appreciate all the time everybody's put into this to get us to this point, and appreciate you listening. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Jackie. No, you can't ask. You can't ask
Oh, you can't
Jackie
ask, okay.
because she's
Because I'm
public
just doing
comment.
public comment, sorry. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks, Jack. But remember, you can ask them. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
So good afternoon now. My name is Richard Calianes, and I own 103 Gulf Island Drive, which is about, it's 2 streets down from this property. I'm the one with the, some would say, the ginormous deck that is 15 feet high. So if you've driven down, so I've owned that house since 2017, and I've been coming to Fort Myers Beach for 40 years. So this is my second home, my home away from home, et cetera. So my reason for coming today is to support their request for this variance. And full disclosure, my lot is probably one of the 6 weird, triangly, odd-shaped lots, okay? And, you know, when when I built the deck, or when I went to build the deck, is when I learned about things like 25-foot setback from Estero Boulevard, and I learned about the encroachment of up to 10 feet. So technically, I could have built a bigger deck because I only encroach a little bit on the Golf Island side of the lot, but I could have built a deck that would have encroached the full 15 feet. So when I then wanted to build a pool, I learned about how you can't build a pool in your front yard. And I said, but I'm not building it in the front yard, I'm building it in the side yard. And then I learned that I had two front yards, Estero and Golf Island. Both were my front yards. So I couldn't build a pool the way I wanted without going through this process, which we were going to start to do when Ian visited us. And then I learned, and I think it was in March, that now the confusion about what's your front yard has now been codified by the change that was made, I think it was Ordinance 01 of this year, or maybe 02, where Estero is your front yard now, regardless of your address. Mine is 103 Golf Island Drive. So now that's my front yard, and it's just very confusing, and it's very frustrating as a property owner that pays the taxes and deals with everything we have to deal with. It's basically a taking of my property, this 25-foot setback. But then there's 50,000 exceptions to that, like the porch. Okay, I could build a porch that is 15 feet from the property line. So when the fire department person was here earlier and said that the reason for the 25 feet is so that they can bring their trucks up on to the property, I mean, really? I can put a fence on my property line. I can plant palm trees. The fence can't be more than 6 feet, but the palm trees can grow 25 feet. So is the fire department going to run over my palm trees in order to get up on the lot? No, they're not going to do that. So, you know, a 25-foot setback, especially before Ian, you know, hundreds of houses, they were built where their stoop was on the sidewalk almost. You know, so, okay, codes change and whatever, but, you know, when people have now had their stuff destroyed and they're learning all these new rules, it's just not fair. You know, it's not fair. It's excessive. 25 feet is, in my opinion, is way too much, and the town really needs to do something. At the time I was trying to build my pool, I couldn't really understand the concept of the two front yards. I actually called the county, and I talked to the county, and I said to somebody there, look, this is my address, and I want to do a pool, and they're like, well, we wouldn't interpret Estero as your front yard. We would interpret it as your side yard, because your house is Golf Island Drive. But the town does what the town does because it's a different thing. So, in short, not to waste any more of your time.
Thank you.
I support what they're trying to do because I think that it's an issue that needs to be taken into consideration.
Thank you so much for your comments. We appreciate it. Is there any other public comment? Hearing none, the public comment is closed. Jane, you had a question for Homebound?
Oh, gosh.
Drew, do you hear this?
I have, hang on.
Yep, I'm here.
I'll make a comment while you're thinking.
Jane's trying to think. Patrick's going to ask you a question.
And just to the last speaker, I agree with them, the 25 feet street setback might be excessive, and we might want to look at that. But just to clarify, if anybody else is listening to this, let's not confuse front and street setbacks. We have street setbacks on the island, and you happen to have a property that fronts on two streets. So you had two street setbacks. We did, as an LPA, provide relief, because previously it was 25-25. So we hear our neighbors, we are trying to provide relief. That's why we said one of them will be 25 and then the other one will be reduced. Fully understand that the one that we kept at 25 might also be too much. and there might be instances where we need to reduce that. But I just want to clarify that we've done our best to provide a change and to provide some relief. Might be a need for more relief if so desired by council.
Well, and I think another thing to consider here is that in talking to Jackie, when I spoke with her earlier, that the difference with what was happening was, yes, you can build a house that could meet all these criteria, but it would have to be a totally custom home that would be out of the purview of what they could afford to do, or not them, but anybody to do. It makes it non-buildable because of what it would then be valued at. And when you can't get a home that is a design that's already put together, that you're not customizing all the other edges of it to make it fit into your little box, then you can afford that home and makes it reasonable, and that's why they've gone this route and they're asking for the exceptions. And this is why, this is where it is something that we have to take into consideration as to whether homes will come back or not. I mean, if that's the reason why you're building this house.
Yes, similar to the reasons that I appeared in front of you 5 weeks in a row is exactly right. We want to be able to enable homeowners to build a beautiful semi-custom home, not a fully custom home, which will cost them 50% more money, take 50% more time through permitting, take 50% more staff time, and take 50% longer to build. So in the interest of getting people back in their homes as quickly as possible, we offer a product that is personalized, not customized. And that's exactly what we're trying to do
It's a
here.
beautiful gift, yes.
I had a question for Jason, and I know, Jason, you didn't write the staff report. It appears to me in reading that, when it comes to the criteria we have to address, when it comes to hardship, staff said we don't agree with the hardship. And my thing
I
is,
think that addresses the whole thing.
my thing, it seems like the rationale for staff saying that is because they could have used the administrative variance process. And I don't follow that logic, and I want to just put on the record that I think from a hardship standpoint, when we see the little triangular red lot that they show, that's really what they could build today with today's setbacks, is this. It's not a buildable lot. That's the hardship. I think that paints the picture. You just can't build on this. So no, you didn't write it, but I think, yes, we do have an administrative variance process, and there's a lot of people that have that option. But we also said that people should be allowed to ask for more square footage if they want.
Right.
And it doesn't negate this hardship, the fact that they didn't go that route. So, and I'm just saying that because I know we will have some more in the future
Right.
that decide to go that route.
And, honestly, staff may bring you back the same justification on saying that the lot may be buildable, just may not be buildable for somebody that wants a house that's more than 15 or 20 feet wide. So the point is taken.
6 foot.
Yes, I understand.
Well, and I think that on top of that, the hardship is also the difference between being able to have a semi-custom and a custom. And I think that is a hardship. So I do think it meets all the conditions.
I want to reflect that Jim Bone had to leave. It's funny, Scott, I thought this note was from you, and I laughed because he says, while I'm not here for the vote, I'm in favor of granting this variances. And I thought this was Scott saying he's in favor of the variance. And so when I saw it, I giggled. Okay. Anyhow, all right. So thank you very much, everyone. Is there any discussion on this, or does someone have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Please.
Pursuant to our review of the application, the code, criteria for granting variances, it's our finding that it meets the criteria, and make a recommendation of approval for the requested variances.
I would second.
So the, oh,
Everybody seconded.
well, you know what the
Third,
vote's
fourth.
going to be right there. Everyone wanted to second the motion. So the motion was made by Patrick. It was seconded by Doug and Dawn, and Jane tried to get in. So it's seconded. And is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Your vote, Patrick?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Yes. Passes unanimously. Congratulations, guys.
Good job.
Thank you, Drew.
Yeah.
Thank you for participating, Drew. Okay, next item on the agenda.
Where did my agenda go? Oh, I'm freezing.
Is the administrative agenda. It doesn't appear that there is anything on the administrative agenda. We'll move on to LPA items and reports. Scott, you got any items and reports?
Not today.
Okay. Do you have any items and reports, Jane?
I have a couple items. One is.
Hey,
you guys-
excuse me,
Can
folks.
you move to the hallway?
Folks, could you go to the hallway, please?
Thanks.
Thank you.
On these houses that they're removing, that FEMA is removing the houses, they are removing everything on the property, including the driveway. But I'm finding that they are leaving, where they're taking palm trees and leaving big Australian pines. What is the basis of that when palms would be local to the community and approved plants, and Australian pines are not buildable if they're on the property?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I think, with all due respect, I understand your concern, and I know that a lot of times during this portion of the agenda, there's a wide-ranging discussion, but how it relates to the LPA.
I'm just asking so that maybe we can get some communication.
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
you can certainly direct your questions to the town manager. Maybe he and his staff have an
Okay.
answer.
Okay, anything else, Jane?
Well, one of my questions, I heard on the news on the news alerts that the beach school is being demolished. Is there anything?
Not the historic portion.
Correct.
Not building two.
What does that mean?
The historic building is the one that you see right on School Street at the front.
Uh-huh.
The newer buildings are being demolished. The historic building is kept and will be renovated.
Okay, so I got that from my kids, and they were terribly upset.
Okay. Any items, Patrick?
Yes, two issues near and dear to me. We got approval for renovating the Beach Elementary School. It's a very positive thing. It's bringing a lot of relief to the children, the parents. However, what I tell everybody is we need to stay very involved. Also, from a construction standpoint, we know that most likely will not open next school year, at the beginning of the school year, and trying to meet the schedule that the district has put forward will be very difficult. But also, we have a short window to make it where our school is financially feasible. So we're gonna have to work very diligently and with the chamber, with all the new businesses, with new residents, to get our enrollment up, to find creative ways of possibly the magnet school or other options to attract more children, get the cost per student down, and we have a 3-year window. So we can't let our foot off the pedal. We have to keep pushing hard. The other thing is, I think most of you attended this Resiliently workshop. Same thing there. It's great. They're coming to see us. We had a good turnout. We provided a lot of comments and recommendations as to what these projects could be. I think the whole community has to keep pushing very hard. Again, there will be an allocation of that money, and there might be more money in the future, but we have to be very vocal as a community what those needs are and to justify why the money should come to Fort Myers Beach versus elsewhere. So same thing, providing input once is not good enough. We have to stay on top of that. We have to talk to our council members, our town manager, and we have to make very strong arguments as to why the Fort Myers Beach projects are priorities for the county.
Amen.
And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. I'm sorry, I have hiccups. Don?
Nothing for me.
Okay. How about you, Doug?
No, ma'am, I'm good.
I have two things. Let's see if I can say them with my hiccups. One, I apologize for being a little snappy with the sound, excuse me, the beached whale hearing. I apologize for that. The second is just a question of curiosity. When I was reading the minutes from March 9th, we were all very much in unison about the comp plan and the basic concepts of the town. And I'm just curious, has anybody changed their mind? Is everybody still?
Not me, no. I feel just the same as I did then.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear it. That's all I have. LPA, community development issues, any? Oh, you've got on your hat. You're done. Okay. Thank you, Jason. Mr. Attorney, anything?
Yes, Madam Chair. I just wanted to state for the record that depending upon what takes place on Tuesday of next week, this is potentially my last LPA meeting that I will be attending as the town attorney. And I just wanted to share with you all that it's been my privilege and honor to assist you all and prior LPAs as they have evolved over the last 7 years, and particularly with respect to the daunting task that is before this board and the community with the rebuild as a result of the damage caused by Hurricane Ian. And I want to wish you all nothing but the best in that regard. Hopefully, I'm retained and I'll be here on I think it is the 27th. Otherwise, it's been my pleasure and honor.
Thank you.
John, I'm just, I think of everyone here, well, Jane, Scott, I've worked with you for a long time, and though I have many a times cut you off because you are one of the most long-winded men I've ever met in my life.
My wife says the same thing.
I'm sure. I have appreciated you being at the end of the line whenever I have called, whenever. It hasn't mattered if it was a weekend or anything. You've always answered the phone, you've always been very helpful, and you've always been very straight with me, even though sometimes I didn't want to hear the answer. And I am sorry if the council does take another direction simply for choosing someone else because of the institutional knowledge you have at this point. I mean, we've lost it so much at Town Hall. And there is something to be said for that. So if, in fact, this is your last meeting, I wish you well in everything you do and have appreciated your efforts.
Thank you. I certainly want to give a shout out to you, and current LPA members who have essentially been here, and you know who you are, who've been here from day one. And sometimes we haven't agreed, but at the end of the day, I would like to think that my advice was based upon what I believe to be was the requirements of the law and the town code, just want to wish each and every one of you good luck with your rebuild, your reestablishment, and to the new board members. It's also been a pleasure working with you all. And again, wish you all nothing but the best. And thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mayor Saracita.
You're very welcome, John. Items for next month's agenda. Does anybody have anything specific? I know Sarah is working on many of the things that we have asked for. I know our meeting on the 27th is going to be lengthy.
And we've added an item.
And we've added an item. Yes, Lonnie. So I think we will. Jason, could we request that in advance? Could we request like a 30-minute break for lunch? And of course, if the town, would like to treat us, that would be great, since we are doing their work. And if we could just request that in advance, because from what I understand, that meeting will be very long.
So just to reiterate what I've heard, for the LPA meeting, go ahead and pre-schedule in a 30-minute break. Would you generally like to split up the number of recommendation, or the number of cases, or do you want time certain?
You know what, we can look at it when it's coming close, because
Okay.
I went over the agenda with, did I go over the agenda with you, or did I go over, well,
I think it
I
was
usually
Kendra.
go over the agenda beforehand,
Mhm.
and we can look at it and see where strategically it would make the most sense to take the break.
Sounds great.
Okay, and, we punched you a little bit today, but it's just that when, I liked Patrick's expression so much about the application not being right. I know we're in a hurry to get people off go, but when they come here, we're either trying to figure out their case for them, which we shouldn't do,
Mhm.
or we're trying to help in a way that we should just be responding to the application, but it's like there's
Right.
not enough there. It's not right. That was such a good visualization. So and I know you guys are under a lot of pressure, and we thank you for your work.
Yeah, I echo the same feelings, and I think, my message to people is, if you're gonna be impatient, push hard to go to hearing.
It's risky.
And it's risky because, again, we're not gonna have time to find solutions for everybody.
Understandable.
On the dais here, and we might just say, no, come back. And you get denied, and you come back with another application. We don't wanna do that, but again, applicants will have to work through the process also.
And we'll take your suggestions, which are absolutely relevant, and we'll go back with applicants and talk about what other possibilities they have before the 27th meeting.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Okay, anything else from anyone? Hearing nothing, let's
to
have a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn at 1:05.
So moved.
Thank you. We're adjourned at 1:05.